trigger warning of the century. And to just also bring people up to speed on kind of some of the things that you talked about last time, that you were in many of these meetings with Elder Ballard and Tim Ballard.
Supernatural, spiritual connection, ketamine trips, talking to the dead prophet Nephi and getting intel from Janet Russin. And I wasn't aware of any of that going on at the time, and probably not a lot of OUR operatives were.
I am so proud of Ryan stepping up and saying what he knows, because it is really hard for just about anyone to speak out against Tim Ballard. So Tom Harrison is one of them.
He's up there with God, angels, Tom Harrison.
Do you hear what I'm saying right now?
That's huge.
That's huge, right? Do not miss the Tom Harrison aspect of this, all right?
Elder Ballard, and explained this to me on a drive, Elder Ballard had given him a special blessing which absolved him.
They'd be calling me and saying, Kara, you're a genius, you cracked the case. I cracked the case, I cracked the case, cracked the case, cracked the case. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Nuance Ho YouTube channel and the Mormon History Hoedown podcast. My name is Kara Burrell. Sometimes I go by Nuance Ho, and sometimes it's the time to talk about Tim Ballard. So here joining me today for a special part 2 episode about Tim Ballard and how he got to be doing the things he's doing today. Welcome back, Ryan Fisher.
Thanks. Hi.
How did things go since we recorded our first episode? Things changed, didn't they?
Yeah, things changed really fast. We recorded on Sunday, and then on Monday, the new motion dropped, and our entire conversation was outdated, like within 24 hours. So that was terrible timing by us, but that's okay because we still can talk and give an updated version. Yeah, that motion actually is. I was really happy when I saw that, because up until this point, up until our conversation, there's really hasn't been anybody talking about the connections between Tim Ballard and Elder Ballard and what that relationship was like. And I felt like I was really going out on a limb by making some of those distinctions and making those claims of what I saw. But then the motion came out the next day, and it's all laid out there, you know? And so I'm not the only one claiming they had a close relationship, a business relationship, personal, obviously spiritual leader relationship. So I felt like that totally validated a lot of my perspective and my story. And that was great. However, I do need to confess that I'm super uncomfortable talking about this because I'm conflicted. I'm absolutely conflicted over this. Tim was a really good friend of mine. I love the guy for a lot of years. We worked closely together, and I don't like throwing people under the bus. And so I'm really conflicted about talking about this stuff. And I don't know that he can, like, personally, I didn't witness crimes being committed by him. And so I can't come forth with firsthand knowledge that he did these things that were illegal. So I'm trying to find out what's true. I'm still trying to sort that out. You're trying to sort that out. A lot of people are trying to sort that out. The legal system's trying to sort that out. So, so my position is I want to figure out what really happened, because my name's tied to him. I promoted him on my TV show for many years, and I want to figure out really what happened and sort that out. But I am conflicted about this conversation. And 2 things happened when we talked last that I think is probably relevant. 2 things happened while we were talking. One is, in the middle of our interview, I started to have a lot of anxiety and like a mini panic attack that Tim was going to come after me. I started thinking about my daughter off at school, and I think it stems from this place that, you know, Tim can be very erratic in his behavior, and kind of in the same way Trump does. You know, Trump is so erratic, and you never know what's going to come out of his mouth, and you never know who he's going to go after. It's probably why Putin didn't invade Russia, because there's this crazy guy in the White House. Who knows? He might just say, screw it. start pushing the nuclear arsenal launch buttons. And so Tim's really unpredictable, and he gets angry really fast. And I don't want to be the recipient of that anger. So I started to have a panic attack. Mini one in the middle of our interview, and started ruminating on all these. I don't know, is he going to show up at my house or something, or is he going to freak out? And I think it's important to acknowledge that, because I think the women are going through that anybody that comes forward, that's one of the reasons why we're scared, because we don't know how he's going to react. And the second thing that happened during our talk was there was a point in there where I'm talking about the relationship to Tim and Elder Ballard, and challenging the narrative that the church says they didn't have any relationship. And you asked me point blank, so what you're saying is they're lying. And I had such a hard time, having those words come out of my mouth. And it's because I'm still Mormon. Your audience is going to be like, that guy's still brainwashed. He can't even though he's saying that statement's untrue, that they are lying, he won't come out and just acknowledge what you're saying. So that's hard for me. I'm still working on that side of my faith journey. So yeah, that's where I'm coming from. This is a hard conversation to have. It's not something I want to talk about. I'm super conflicted about it. I guess that's all I'm saying. And one thing that my wife pointed out is when I got triggered and started worrying about repercussions that might come to me and my family by talking about this, my wife pointed out, that's beaten wife syndrome. That I started saying reconciliatory language about Tim, and trying to give him the benefit of the doubt. And I bounce in my own head between these two places, trying to give him the benefit of the doubt, hoping none of this is true and that it's all false. But then hearing the testimony of the women and be like, this guy needs to be kicked in the balls so hard.
Yeah.
And
I
so
see what you mean.
So I'm kind of erratic, and hopefully I can bring it together to talk about things that are important and help find resolution to this total mess that so many people are embroiled in.
Wow. That's powerful. Seriously. And I'm just really honored that you reached out and that we can keep having these conversations, because besides all of the just bravery that it takes to go against Tim Ballard in your position, I don't know how many other men would be willing to do that. And the women who have allegedly been so harmed and victimized, glad that you brought that up, that can't imagine what they're going through. And so many people who are not even part of the lawsuit right now can't speak up. So do whatever we can to support Ryan over here. And yeah, just can't say thank you enough.
Yeah, there's a lot of people in this position. Tim has worked with a lot of people, and there's a lot of people that I know that are friends with that are conflicted about whether they should. They got nothing to gain by coming forward and speaking out. And a lot of them feel guilt that they didn't do something sooner. But this pervasive fear of the wrath that they could incur from Tim, from OUR, from legal perspectives, and also from membership in the church, that keeps people silent, and it keeps people from questioning whether they should stand up for something that they believe is right.
Yeah, which is crazy, because we're talking about something that, when I was in the church, my membership to me, it meant do what is right and let the consequences follow. Some of these insider stories connect the dots for people. So I'm so grateful that you're here and being willing to speak about these things. If you need to stop and have another panic attack, it's fine. I have a house we can walk around in. So Thanks for doing this.
All right. Yeah.
All right. Where do you want to start with now?
Well, where do you want to start? What should we talk about today? The motion filed Monday, the entire landscape behind this whole conversation shifted, and there's so many different directions we could go. So you've got that organized, right? You got it all laid out.
Yeah, I have slides. I have video clips. So I'm going to bring some context in here. Let me put this full screen. So this is From Yahoo News, April 30th, 2024. The title is Tim Ballard arranged for AG Reyes to use cocaine in downtown penthouse. Amended lawsuit claims. So that's not really going to be the focus of what we're talking about today, though. Important to mention that, in case you didn't know, sometimes politicians do illegal drugs and don't follow the law. But so trigger warning, heavy trigger warning on what I'm about to get into. What I want to focus on right here is that the amendment to the lawsuit was filed Friday, and it contained several new assertions, including that a now deceased leader of the Utah-based Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints knew about one of the alleged sexual assaults perpetrated by Ballard. Okay, so scroll down to where it says, the women allege that Ballard sexually abused them under what is known as the couple's ruse, which Ballard publicly touted as an undercover tactic where female employees or volunteers would pretend to be his girlfriend on overseas missions. This tactic was supposed to shield him from engaging with child sex trafficking victims, but the women behind the lawsuit allege he used it to coerce and abuse them. And of that right there, I think there is ample evidence in the lawsuit of that claim. So the lawsuit was initially filed in October against Ballard, OUR, and several other groups. Among the new assertions in the lawsuit is that the late President M. Russell Ballard of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, talking special witness for Jesus Christ, set apart as a prophet, seer, and revelator, okay? Quote, sanctioned the couple's ruse and was aware of one of the sexual assaults wherein Tim Ballard allegedly went to a woman's home and raped her, okay? Quote, President Ballard did not tell Tim Ballard to go to the police and report his horrible act, the lawsuit states. Rather, President Ballard told Tim Ballard to do better at obeying the couple's ruse rules. As I've said before, couple's ruse rules. Kind of hard to say because it's something that's never really been implemented. I think there's ample evidence in the lawsuit that from Janet Russin and so forth that the rules are really whatever Tim Ballard wanted the rules to be. He's the prophet. He's the go-to guy. So then it says at the bottom, last fall, the church released a statement denouncing Tim Ballard, saying that he betrayed President Ballard's friendship and that President Ballard had, quote, never authorized his name or the name of the church to be used for Tim's personal or financial interests. So, Ryan, I'm really glad you're here and shedding some light on how deep those personal and financial interests go. And then I'm going to go back up to this section that says that Sean Reyes says, after hearing the stories in person, I believe them. Reyes said at the time, I'm heartbroken for what they've endured and the trauma they will face in their entire lives. But Tim Ballard has put out several statements saying these women are crazy. These are nothing new. This is the sex traffickers coming out after me. Ken Krogh from the Spear Fund has said similar things. And then in a statement, Chad Colton, the spokesperson for Tim Ballard, said the women behind the civil suit will smear anyone, including respected members of the LDS Church, without any evidence at all if they think it will help them get rich. Now, that is what we are going to continue to get into. So heavy trigger warning for some of this section that we're going to talk about. So allegations that an apostle of the church sanctioned the couple's ruse, knew about Tim Ballard's pattern of abusing women, going all the way to literally penetrating, raping them. I definitely think that the evidence of the lawsuit right now of what, the internal people at OUR, what the investigations into the women's claims have, proven that he has this pattern. But whether the apostle knew about the ruse, knew about Tim Ballard raping this woman and said, that's okay, kid, just try better next time. There's not any specific evidence of that in the lawsuit. So we'll just kind of have to wait and see. But the evidence of Tim Ballard abusing women in this couple's ruse and in OUR internally knowing full well that that's what Tim was doing, I think that is very well laid out in the lawsuit. So whether the apostle knew about it to that degree, that's what we'll talk about more. So let me get into a couple more things. My straightforward opinion of this is that because of the unrestrained access to power and influence and people's minds within this Mormon community that draws so many people into the Heartland model, people in conspiracies, people who want to believe they have special powers and things, it makes a space for prophets to rise up and to think that they are above the rules and gain a following, amass money and amass defenders. And then people like Tom Harrison and books like Visions of Glory, they allow a space for people like Tim Ballard to rise up, Lori, Chad, Vallow Daybell case, Jody Hildebrandt, the whole world is kind of looking at Mormonism right now and saying, what is going on inside of there that allows so many insane, fundamentalist, dangerous, murderous beliefs to take place and take a hold of people's minds. And this Tim Ballard one, another one, catering red meat to the most fundamentalist base that has a good path to their ideas, their spirituality, their confirmation biases, that they're special, unique, to take a root in a certain type of orthodoxy in fundamentalist Mormonism that is allowed throughout the top leadership of the Mormon Church. At some point, Tim Ballard was able to get connected with Tom Harrison, who is this inspiration behind the book, The Visions of Glory. The lawsuit has, if people don't realize, I actually didn't even realize this because I didn't, it's just, you don't know what to pay attention to sometimes until you're like, oh, that was gold. I was just like a person who likes silver. I don't know. I wasn't paying attention as much, but I reread the entire lawsuit, both like the first one kind of that came out in October and then more of the amendments that came out last week. And there are a couple blessings from Tom Harrison, and supposed to be a mental health professional. And he is inspired and has a lot of connections with Jody Hildebrandt, he was working closely with Lori and Chad Daybell, and also working closely with Tim Ballard. Take me back to something, because all of this stuff that you called me up after the amendments came, and you said that so many other things came back to your recollection, and maybe it was this story that we want to talk about the connection between Tom Harrison and Tim Ballard that we didn't talk about in our first interview. Should we give a little bit of an overview of Visions of Glory and why this is important first?
Yeah, we can do it that way.
Okay. You said that you read Visions of Glory. This is a book that describes this man named Spencer. It's written kind of, I don't know, ghost written in a way, you could say, by Tom Harrison, and then given to this man named Pontius. John Pontius. And then it's one of the top-selling books in Mormon circles. It describes having this heightened spiritual sensitivity and supposedly allows individuals to have a deeper understanding of others. It's all kind of through this near-death experiences, and the narrator claims to have access to the intimate details and thoughts about people, their actions, and their character. And then in this state, believe that they can perceive others, whether they are good or bad, honest or corrupt. And one example from the book off the top of my head is him describing like these near-death experiences and visions and being in a hospital room and feeling like the nurses that are working on him are angels. And as soon as the doctor walks in, he's like, I can tell everything that everyone's ever done. It's neither good or bad, except for also it is, because they're either angels or they're possessed by dark spirits. But I can see their people's entire life in the context of what their struggles are, what they've been through. And like, oh, the doctor that just walked in, he's having an affair with the nurse right now. Or when somebody watches pornography on a screen, it's literally these other evil demons who want to get a taste of mortality and
they
carnal
enter
desires
into the crown and head of the person, possess them so they can experience the euphoria of
exactly right
that.
And
so it goes even further into like he can look at a couch and see that an affair happened on that couch, and the fibers of the couch are crying out for justice, like furniture talks, I guess, to him.
Wow. Yeah. So this is a book that's taken a lot of people by storm. And Lori and Chad Daybell, just to drill this home even further, there's a body cam of the police going to go try to arrest Lori and Chad Daybell in Hawaii after they just went on a total murdering spree, after very much being inspired by this book, Visions of Glory, and Tom Harrison. And the book is underneath like Lori's leg as she's sitting outside.
She's literally reading it while the police are coming up and serving her papers.
Like with this on her conscience, being like, and what's next, in our game plan here. So all of these ideas centering around Tom Harrison as this mental health professional in the church who has a social worker background and supposedly works with kids who have been victims of sexual abuse. So now we gave a little bit of context of Visions of Glory, Tom Harrison. So how did that get going? What did Tim tell you?
Yeah. So one day Tim came to me, and this was early on, shortly after OUR was founded. I don't know the exact date on when this entered, but it was early on. And Tim came to me and asked me if I've read Visions of Glory, and I had. I mean, with all of the offshoots and subcultures of Mormonism, that book like really ripped through them all. And so I had that bead. I read through the book. I told him, yeah. He's like, what do you think of it? And I was like, I don't know. Seems like there's something to it. It wouldn't surprise me if that's how it all went down. And the doomsday prepper community within Mormonism is super big, and it's kind of hidden. Everybody that's Mormon actually is a doomsday prepper in some way, shape, or form, because they most likely have food storage. And for some, it stops there. Taking the church's counsel to have food storage. And some people, completely take it into building secret bunkers outside Cedar City, stocking it with ammunition and things like that. That's only discovered if a forest fire comes through. Those kind of people are all around Utah also. So Visions of Glory, Tim talked to me and asked me about that book, and we had a conversation, and he was excited to tell me that, well, Spencer in that book, he's reached out, and you're not going to believe what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And what he told Tim was that when these destructions that are described in his vision, in his book, are going to happen, everybody that's a pedophile, everybody that's evil is going to be destroyed, wiped off the map, right? And the result of that are going to be hundreds of thousands, at least tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of innocent children that are now liberated from their abusers and captors. And he told Tim that OUR and Tim and him need to prepare for this event, for this happening. And so Tim was like, all right, we're going to shift the resources of OUR to create a structure for taking in these kids, these refugee kids, for when this happens. And this was shocking to me when I heard about this. But that was what the plan was. And so from then on, Tom Harrison was working with Tim and OUR, and OUR. Tim said that OUR hired him as a consultant, but the real purpose was to prepare the way for creating a rehab place for all of these abused children that were going to be left behind when the destructions happened. And
wow.
That's what I was told. And I don't know. I haven't looked into if Tom Harrison is actually on OUR's payroll or not. I haven't looked into that, but that's what I was told in this conversation. And it's a pretty salacious claim out there, but I know that Tim believed Tom Harrison, and they're moving forward with this plan. So yeah.
And that, my first thing that goes off in my mind is like, how did what OUR, what it even was beginning as, let alone what it became, how does that fit in with the plan of this vision? And maybe I wonder if Tim just never talked about that. Maybe that was in his back pocket as like the long-term plan, because from what we already know of what, people's words speaking louder, or people's actions speaking louder than their words, and what he was doing with the abolitionist TV show project, and what he was doing with OUR and these ops, forget all of the other allegations of things. Like, can you see that fitting in with what he actually was doing in your experience?
I don't know. I mean, how do you implement a plan to create a structure to accept hundreds of thousands of refugee kids left over after the destructions and society has completely collapsed? Like, if that's the task, I don't even know where to begin.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where to begin with that one.
Mm-hmm. I guess the only thing that would connect it for me is, I think like we talked about, no, actually I talked about in my stream about him and connecting with the whiteboard and things about the Children Need Families was another one of the nonprofits that was on Tim's whiteboard, that's run by his wife, Catherine, and also Janet Resson, I believe, is also part of that organization, his psychic. And there's a whole long story about the orphanages in Haiti and connecting this Children Needs Families organization that his wife was running to placing people into forever families, you know, in Utah or wherever. So that's, besides kind of having connections with adoption, I don't know where else that would have been manifested, but that's really quite the wild claim, because I don't know if the LDS Church, what, are they the ones who are supposed to receive all these kids after the destruction? Like, that's such a, and it's all based on Tom Harrison's visions of
vision.
Wow.
It's all based on his vision. I know Tom Harrison had the endorsement of Neil A. Maxwell. Was his close confidant and friend before he passed away. The church, Visions of Glory, was in Deseret Book, if I'm not mistaken, for a number of years before it was taken out. And so Tim and Tom Harrison created a partnership and a friendship. But what's I think important about understanding this is this idea that everything is about to blow up, the world is about to be destroyed, puts people in a mental headspace that is really dangerous and scary. And that's what we see with Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow, is they thought that these destructions were imminent, like right around the corner, like happening in 30 days, 6 months, I don't know. And when you're in that headspace, then killing your kids obviously isn't going to have any repercussions because everybody's going to die anyways. And I think my interpretation of this, as just sitting back, armchair quarterbacking, is Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell believed that destructions were going to happen, civilization is going to get wiped out. Their kids that she believed had this were possessed by evil spirits, were going to be wiped out anyways in these destructions. So she's releasing them early from this torment and actually doing her kids a favor. As sick and twisted as that sounds, that's the religious and spiritual justification for what they did. Part of it. Now, I don't know where Tim's headspace was believing the Visions of Glory things, but if he believed that everything's going to get wiped out soon, that means accountability gets wiped out. Obviously, with Chad and Lori Daybell, that's what we saw. They took off to Hawaii and were going on a honeymoon. They didn't think they would be held accountable for the crimes that they committed. And were probably shocked that they got served papers. And I think they were going to Hawaii just to wait out this destructions and let the whole world burn. And they were going to be protected and saved and stuff. I don't know if that's where Tim's headspace was. I'd love to ask him about that, like what happened with Visions of Glory. But that's where it started, was Tom reached out to Tim. They created a partnership in OUR. I believe, my understanding, and I have to verify this, was that Tom was on the payroll of OUR as an aftercare specialist, but the larger picture was creating a structure to help save all of these refugee kids once the world burns.
Wow. I literally can't, I don't have words.
If anybody, and this is one of the things that like really turned me off to the whole American Covenant narrative, if you're in a place of fear thinking that the world is imminent, it's a scary place, because it kind of gives you justification, or I guess license, to take extreme measures, whatever you need to do to protect you and your family, or to try and curry favor with God that you're on the righteous team, so you're not. And that message that the world is about to be destroyed and is imminent, that comes from the teachings and doctrines of the LDS Church. And I mean, it's still taught and practiced today. I heard President Nelson not too long ago reiterate that tithing is fire insurance.
Yeah. You will be saved in the great day of burning. That's what he says. Yeah. A couple more things from the lawsuit that will come into play in my grand cracking of this case. So some of these things you might have heard before, but trust me where I'm going with this. Important pieces to put together. 76, Ken Krogh saw a vision of Tony Robbins and other wealthy persons coming to Ballard to help this cause. It goes on to say, Ken Krogh shared these visions with President Ballard, who was meeting regularly with Tim Ballard to help him develop his business goals. Ryan has said Tim Ballard didn't hardly cough without mentioning President Ballard, tied at the hip. Upon information and belief, President Ballard and or Ken Krogh used psychic Janet Russin for readings to advise them on how they should proceed in all aspects of their life. Some witnesses have claimed that Janet Russin was President Ballard's personal psychic and that President Ballard vouched for her psychic powers whenever people would question Ballard about using a psychic as his only source for locating trafficked children. What does Janet Russin have that M. Russell Ballard doesn't have? He wants to get his hands on that. I don't know. President Ballard, through his leadership role in the Mormon Church, became good friends with several wealthy members of the church, including Russell Brunson, founder of ClickFunnels, and Ken Krogh, the co-founder of Inside Sales and founder of the Spear Fund. Ken Krogh, a disciple of Tom Harrison, who claims to have gotten his authority from Elder Neil A. Maxwell, now deceased, of the Mormon Church, started having visions of Tim Ballard, and the two developed a very close friendship. President Ballard used his authority and position to recruit wealthy Mormon members such as Brunson and Krogh to provide business coaching and mentorship to Tim Ballard, as well as asking them to donate to Tim's organizations, including OUR and the Spear Fund. In a self-fulfilling prophecy, Tim Ballard became friends with Tony Robbins, an American author, coach, and speaker, which further solidified the views of President Ballard, Ken Krogh, and Janet Russin that Tim Ballard had been chosen of God. Tony Robbins raised staggering amounts of money for Ballard, including several millions of dollars at his birthday party. So jumping into the part of the lawsuit about Ballard taking his ruse to Spear. So for all this rigmarole happens, 222, rather than call the police and or FBI to turn Ballard into law enforcement because of his sexual assaults, a joint plan was hatched between OUR and Ballard, whereby he would resign ostensibly because of the appearance of a conflict of interest with the release of Sound of Freedom, in which he has a financial interest in, and Ballard would take a very lucrative severance agreement and remain the face of OUR so it could continue to raise money. As part of the plan, everyone was required to sign NDAs. With his image intact, Ballard moved to the Ken Krogh-run Spear Fund. Ken Krogh, tied with Tom Harrison, tied with these visions. Doesn't matter what vehicle we're saving kids in, doesn't matter how much we discredit this organization we've built. Tim has a bigger mission, and he needs to be connected to people like Ken Krogh. There is a bigger picture here. Keep it in mind. With his image intact, Ballard moved to the Ken Krogh run, the Spear Fund, where he is able to continue raising money from well-intentioned people wanting to end human trafficking. Ken Krogh has put out statements denouncing the plaintiff's claims. Similar to Tim saying, they're all crazy. We didn't do anything wrong. Things that are in Tim Ballard's blessing from Tom Harrison. It's easy to denounce these people. Keep on with the mission. They pay these evil spirits no mind, basically. OUR remained silent, using his face and the worldwide opening tour of Sound of Freedom to raise money and allowing Ballard to continue his grooming, drinking, and sexual deviancy all on the donor's dime. Why would they allow that to continue? So another part of the lawsuit to keep in mind, Ballard explained that they were running into problems on operations. He said that if male operators don't touch the women or children, the traffickers would figure out that it was a sting and would create danger for all. Ballard told WW how the couple's ruse came to him by revelation from God, as there was no way he could have thought up such a brilliant ruse. At this time, Tim Ballard was ignoring his in-house counsel's advice that what he was doing was illegal and unethical and could subject him to criminal liability from the Davis County investigation and the Department of Justice. Ballard claims to be blessed by Tom Harrison and through Spear President Ken Krogh, claiming to anoint Ballard as a chosen one, not subject to the jurisdictions of government and church authorities. Ballard has been, until recently, business associates and close friends with Apostle and acting president of the Quorum of Apostles, M. Russell Ballard. Now, I don't know who to credit for this amazing, infographic chart that links all of these different players together, but this is amazing. So just a couple things for the roadmap of this. Let's go ahead and zoom in on, for instance, Tim Ballard right here. So to the right, he's the founder of OUR, and then up, Eternal Core spoke at this conference that links to Tom Harrison. Over to the side, Ken Krogh, senior advisor to Tim Ballard. He's also connected to Sean Reyes as a close personal friend. Eternal Core is Tom Harrison, aka Spencer, who's the co-founder. And then Tom Harrison has hosted Jody Hildebrandt on his podcast and spoken at Eternal Core. Jody Hildebrandt, is the owner of Connections and connected with, obviously, Ruby Franke and Malnourished. Allegedly, I don't know. I have seen the videotapes, though, of malnourishing and abusing Ruby Franke's kids. Back over to Tom Harrison. He's Spencer of Visions of Glory. That connects over to Lori Vallow, Chad Daybell. Lori was reading Visions of Glory in that video. She's married to Chad Daybell. They're friends with Julie Rowe. They claim to have near-death experiences that gave them powers. They have a belief in possession in light and dark persons, a belief in multiple mortal and probation married in previous lives. So a lot of these same beliefs link the Stoddard family, Hannah Stoddard, James Stoddard, who James is now dead. He's the dad of Hannah Stoddard, who I have debunked on my channel a million times. Hannah Stoddard speaks at all of the Book of Mormon Evidence conferences. She runs the Joseph Smith Foundation. She's got her own kooky beliefs that all tie in with these people, that links that over to Rod Meldrum, the Firm Foundation, to Glenn Beck, who has spoke at the Firm Foundation Expo a million times. Glenn Beck founded the Nazarene Fund. Rod Meldrum and Tim Ballard are good friends. And like I've said a million times, Tim Ballard has spoken at the Firm Foundation at Rod Meldrum's events for the Book of Mormon Evidence Conference. Okay, then back up to the top. Neal A. Maxwell was a famous apostle in the church. He was in the same ward as Tom Harrison, who's the Spencer, who's having these visions in Visions of Glory. He likely is this unnamed apostle in the book who sanctioned these types of beliefs. Deseret Book distributed Visions of Glory. Deseret Book published multiple books of Tim Ballard's. And then all of the previous mentioned connections between M. Russell Ballard, the apostle here of the church. His son-in-law is Brad Bauer, and Brad Bauer is on the board of Liberty 89, whose mission is to publish Mormon nationalist books, being the home in Farmington of some of Tim Ballard's operations and the actual address. Yeah, he's the founder of this Indulgent Foods. And then that's the same business address as Slave Stealers, LLC, where everything in Tim's whiteboard points back up to. So that's how they're all connected together again. Liberty 89 board member Ken Krogh. He's now the president of the Spear Fund. The Spear Fund is where Tim Ballard went after he was kicked out of OUR this time last year. Okay, and that's about all I have to get into with this infographic.
So that graphic identifies all of these different groups that are part of this. As I see it, it's like this new age revolution within Mormonism. It's a return to fundamental things with Joseph Smith, but also looking forward to preparing the world for the end of civilization as we know it. And all those people and those groups are very passionate about their role, their specific role, and what they think needs to happen within the Mormon church and Mormon culture. And so they're pushing in all these different directions. And a lot of them, what we're seeing and the story that's emerging is that there's general authorities behind a lot of these movements, or at least in support of all these movements. Like Tim Ballard and Elder Ballard and the American Covenant is not the only one. And so the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, if they wanted to shut any of those down, then they could do exactly what they did to Tim. And they could cut his legs off with a statement and denounce it. But they're letting these things percolate, letting these things go forward. And it's my belief that it's because there's very influential general authorities that believe what they're doing is in preparation for the second coming of Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. And I don't know where to go from there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say, especially with, like I mentioned, Tom Harrison and Jody Hildebrandt, and just any idea that's not based on the best practices of psychology, and you can tell people are good and light and in distortion and not from your spiritual witness, and you can kind of keep people on this carrot dangling on the stick, coming back to you for answers, for spiritual guidance, and you're probably effing them up way more than if they just sat in the woods for a couple hours, right? So yeah, I think that the church itself, it just doesn't have a vested interest in giving people the healthiest tools. And instead, Like, who is the number one, who is the number one procurer of clients, the number one procurer of funds for people like Tom Harrison, Jody Hildebrandt, and Tim Ballard and so forth? The church sends the most people to them. And like you said it perfectly, like with one announcement, with one statement, the church can cut that person's legs off and say, we don't approve of their ideas and tactics and actions and so forth. But yeah, I just don't think that the church is good. Mormon church, probably false, probably evil. Yeah.
Or at the very least, they want to protect whatever membership they have. And
sure,
and what if they were to come out and denounce all these different groups and stuff, that would be alienating a lot of different people within the church. And the example of this and why they are between a rock and a hard place is like when President Nelson came out and advocated for taking the COVID shot. The people that were anti-vax in the church freaked out. And a lot of them left the church because that took down their belief that President Nelson is an inspired prophet of God. And so something as simple as that, as advocating for the membership to take the vaccine, that had real serious consequences. And so I think the church is really gun shy about denouncing anything because there's these subgroups of members and they don't want to push them out over something that they don't feel like they need to address, even though they should.
And John Dehlin brings up this great point in an amazing podcast, a couple series that he does. With Lauren Matheson at Hidden True Crime, Megan Connor, who is Lori Vallow's cousin, and then Mindy Caldwell, Mormon super sleuther. So, an amazing podcast series that he does with those ladies. And he brings up this great analogy about like some kind of prophet or somebody who has magic powers, who would convince people that you can fly and you can jump off of buildings, and says, go try it, basically. And then you're surprised when people are tumbling from buildings because they thought that they had the power to fly because they were so convinced. And I'm like, it sounds harsh, but that literally is what having these mystical prophetic ideas just in the milieu of Mormonism, and then straight down to the doctrines being taught, you get surprised when people actually take, a personal stake in them. People are not aware of what has grown out of that. Like, you're in for a world of trouble, right?
Yeah. And that space for those people that vacuum has been created by the Elders Church, the leaders claim to be prophets, seers, and revelators, right? And yet they don't prophesy. They're not revealing ancient records through a gift of seeing, and they're not revelating besides ambiguous statements about the future. And so people are like thirsting for that. And then people like Spencer, Tom Harrison come along with visions and prophecies, and they eat that up because they're thirsting for that. They've been conditioned to seek prophets, seers, and revelators.
That's a great point.
But because the prophecies and the ancient records are supposed to come forth and the revelations aren't coming forth, there's a vacuum for those people in their belief structure. And Tom Harrison comes along and feeds and fills that vacuum, fills that void. And what I love about what's really important that Lauren Matheson True Crime Podcast points out is she is within the church, and she's recognizing that this is a problem and that it leads to dangerous results. And the fruits of that come out in the Chad and Lori Daybell case with 2 kids that are dead. And so members in the church, like Lauren, we need to stand up and say, hey, this is not a good message. First of all, it's not a Christ-like message. It has nothing to do with Christianity. But second of all, it's a dangerous message, and we shouldn't let this percolate without some sort of checks or balances or denunciation of people that are advancing very dangerous ideas in this vacuum. She does a good job of explaining that on John Dehlin's podcast. And
she is amazing. Yeah. She comes from a background of being a news reporter. She's married to a brilliant, psychologist, therapist, speaks to these in terms of like mental health and stuff. And she describes how even as an active member that she will speak out in Sunday school class when people want to double down on people being possessed by evil spirits. And like, that is in the Bible, that permeates. But she's like, I know too much about what this turns into, and I don't want to talk about this. We're honoring the memory of, these kids that were slain, JJ and Tylee. And not to mention, there's also like Lori and Chad Daybell also went on a murdering spree. Also, their exes and stuff like that. So there's, do you know how many people are actually killed? I don't know the number.
Tylee and JJ, Lori's ex-husband, and then I think her previous husband before that died under suspicious circumstances. That might be relooking. So that'd be 7, 6 or 7.
Outrageous, yeah. And so with that many people, with that many people in the ground, I really appreciate any Mormons who take this seriously because background, being raised by the people that I was raised with, and the ways that like I hate to say that like my parents have treated my autistic daughter being possessed by demons. That's not something I talk about very often because I love my parents, but they are of a mindset that is not rational when it comes to like child psychology and what the most rational approach is with children. And it's caused a really big problem and division in my life. And so that is the thing that I want more than anything is Mormonism to be a healthier place to belong to. And that these ideas, we look them right in the face and we say, no, like that's divisive. If the thing that your religion is actually manifesting is not a good fruit, it is divisive, it is harmful, it's not based on the best practices of what we know about how our brains work, psychology, and it's, oh, your house is possessed because I saw some flies, or your child is possessed because she swore, and it's not the logical reasons that move there. If we allow that kind of stuff, in my own family, if we allow that kind of stuff, it's that's the sickness. And I don't like the branches that grow out of that tree from the roots.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that are happening. Today's family, the reality of today's family is they're multi-faith. There's multi-beliefs. I don't know a single family where every single parent and child are all true blue Mormons. And so the church has to broaden its beliefs to, at the very least, stop dividing families against each other. At the very least. When me and my wife stepped away from attending church, people at church telling my daughter that, well, you can't believe anything your parents say because they've gone apostate. That's so hurtful. And thankfully, I'm great with my daughter. We have an awesome relationship and it survives that kind of scrutiny, but it can be hurtful.
I feel like what my content and these interviews are going to be doing is really helping shine a gigantic light on this so that less people get harmed. And also more people like the women in the lawsuit feel a sense of justice and feel like somebody's hearing them. And just again, making as much noise as we can about this before more people get hurt.
Yeah, hopefully it has a difference.
Yeah. Let me read from an excerpt from Tim Ballard, the lawsuit, from a victim statement, HDT, that says, okay, yeah, do you want to read it?
Sure. He also had told me to read this book. It was called The Visions of Glory, and that he had met with the man who wrote it. His name was Tom Harrison, and that Tom had told him lots of visions that he had that actually had Tim in them. He said that Tim would be prophet of the LDS Church one day, that he would be the president of the United States. Wow.
So just for a good overview of things to do with OUR, Eternal Core, Liberty 89, Visions of Glory, A Vow, Preparing a People, Firm Foundation, that's run by Rod Meldrum and does the Heartland model and so forth. And then CNF, this is an amazing overview. So Ken Krogh is the current president / CMO of the Spear Fund and has a long and fascinating history of business ventures. In addition to his consulting, he has consulted for the church on a number of occasions. Ken is on the board of Liberty 89 with Brad Bauer, who is the son-in-law of Elder Ballard, a media company founded by Tim Ballard. So there's a picture of those players. And Liberty 89 was registered in August of 2016. From the recent publishing of the 75 pages of investigative documents on OUR, we learn of a meeting held at Thanksgiving Point between Kirsten Stockwell from OUR, Tim Ballard, Ken Krogh, Tom Harrison, and Hugh Vale from Liberty 89 as described by Kirsten. Kirsten said Tim took her to a meeting in the official OUR work capacity to meet with people at Thanksgiving Point. So Kirsten's meeting with these guys. Kirsten said they claim to have visions of special intelligence of the second coming, which is going perfectly back to what you said, that all of this is to prepare for the second coming. So
right.
Kirsten said that because she had some spiritual things and Tim found out about it, Tim, could share with her more secret things that I'm, Tim, involved in. Kirsten said during this meeting, they spoke about Liberty 89, America being a fallen nation, which goes perfectly along with the American covenant and restoring this covenant on this nation. And Tim feeling like we'll only be blessed if we restore this American covenant. Otherwise, we're a fallen nation. And how it was Tim's calling to do these things with OUR and restoring America to the covenant. Kirsten said restoring America to the covenant was a big mission of Tim's, and was called of God to do this. Kirsten said Tim was very verbal about Elder Russell Ballard's involvement and behind it, going perfectly along with what you have also said. But Kirsten said that she didn't know if she believed that. Tim would say that M. Russell Ballard is part of Liberty 89. Apparently, Elder Ballard was well aware of Liberty 89 and its mission to publish what appears to be American-centric, nationalistic propaganda infused with Christianity. Everything you just said. This was all to fulfill the American covenant, a religious theme presented extensively through Ballard's books. It is very important to note that Kirsten said the participants claimed to have visions and special intelligence of the second coming. Who on the participants list provided is known to have visions and experiences? Tom Harrison. So if all of this is all taking root in Tim Ballard's beliefs, who are his influences and who's he surrounded by? Again, Tom Harrison is a cognitive therapist with 40-year career that has included teaching in multiple facilities at the University of Utah and private counseling. He is not currently licensed CSW in the state of Utah. Tom is a member in good standing and has significant ties within the church. Neighbors of Neil A. Maxwell and Spencer W. Kimball. Over the last decade, it's been rumored that Tom is the Spencer, whose visions are recorded in the best-selling book Visions of Glory by John Pontius. The book is filled with visions of the impending apocalypse and the LDS's faithful role in it. Eternal Core is a community for practitioners and those struggling with mental health and emotional health who are seeking treatment outside the bounds of modern pharmacology while maintaining the spiritual core of individual identity. The enmeshment of religion and counseling is apparent in their presentations. Significantly, I want to emphasize the apparent overlap of OUR and Eternal Core. As you can see, Tim Ballard has an existing relationship with Tom, Liberty 89, and has participated in Eternal Core events. In addition to Tim, Jessica Mass and Tyler Schwab have ties to Eternal Core. Jessica Mass is the chief aftercare at OUR, and Tyler Schwab is the OUR director of aftercare.
Yeah, I mean, I know Ken Krogh. He's in my parents' ward.
Really?
Yeah, Hugh is a friend.
Kirsten said she was in a few private meetings with Elder Russell Ballard, not as a private church meeting, but he would come to an OUR event and they would meet in a VIP meeting. However, Tim met with Elder Ballard once a month, probably at least once a month.
At least once a month.
So from my reading, one of the branches and significant relationships in and around OUR is the connection between OUR aftercare services and Children Need Families. CNF is a quasi-adoption aid service to help facilitate and fund child adoptions that intersect OUR aftercare. Tim Ballard appointed Janet Russin as the head of CNF. Janet Russin made headlines in recent Vice pieces exposing the supernatural methodology employed to locate, unsuccessfully, Gardy Marty, the primal focus of OUR organizational and fundraising efforts. Eventually, Janet has had a working relationship with Jessica Mass. In the recent Davis County publications, all of these, Eternal Core, OUR, Liberty 89, Firm Foundation, Avow, Visions of Glory, overlap significantly, and it should be no surprise these personal and professional relationships exist. The worst of the theology espoused in these spheres has made itself manifest in the forms of Chad and Lori Daybell. With newfound revelations that Tom Harrison was involved in Liberty 89 and has supposedly consulted with church leaders before, I can't help but believe Elder M. Russell Ballard is aware, at least tangentially, of what is going on in these spheres. Elder Ballard's son-in-law, the frequent face of his shadow relationships with OUR, continual presence on the board of Liberty 89 only bolsters my belief that Elder Ballard is tangentially aware of what is going on. Either that or he hasn't connected the dots right in front of him. Here's one connection I'm making. right now as we're speaking. Do you know what I'm going to say?
No, I'm not Janet Russin.
Janet Russin is on my mind right now. Here's what I'm thinking. With what it just said, if I'm Tim Ballard and I am getting these revelations from Tom Harrison, and he's saying, you are going to be the prophet of the Mormon Church, president of the United States, and your mission is to do this, this, and this. And he's really making moves for him, get connected into like Tony Robbins, and things are happening for Tim. He's got like a confirmation bias that Tom Harrison knows what he's talking about, and he's only more fulfilled. He's only more successful as he probably listens to Tom Harrison and the blessings that he gives him. And if Tom Harrison is saying like that the earth is going to be destroyed and you are going to need to have some kind of facility to, what would be the right word? Some structure, some type of structure,
infrastructure and process for gathering children.
For gathering these children, my theory would go like he sets up all these different nonprofits to funnel different money, different places. And one of the places is like Children Needs Families in this nonprofit. And who is in charge of that? It's his wife, and it's Janet Russin. And so if he's looking to like kind of a spiritual leader who has visions like Tom Harrison, he's also looking to Janet Russin as a psychic and spiritual leader to run this facility of Children Needs Families as one of his nonprofits that various money gets funneled in and out of. And that kind of is the answer to what Tom Harrison was kind of asking him to do. And so in my mind, Tim's like, all right, well, I got Children Need Families. I got this run by my wife and by my psychic over here. When shit hits the fan, we have some type of container for that. And that's fulfilling that prophecy. And then he's able just to keep rolling with all the other things that he's doing. So I don't know the beginnings of how his relationship with Janet Russin started, but I would assume that the relationship might have started with him needing some help and vision of how to have a container for what to do with all these millions and billions of kids in the great day of burning. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, allegedly in the lawsuit or in this motion, Janet Russin, there's a claim that she was a personal psychic for Elder Ballard.
Right.
I've read that. I don't know whether that's true or not. That's alleged. That may be where it started. What's crazy to me is I just was reading through some of my old emails to look up something, and I was on some email group email chats with Janet, and all of a sudden it jogged in my memory that I know Janet, that she was part of some of the things we were doing, but I didn't know she was a psychic. And so what was happening is in OUR, there's like the above board. People are in different positions doing their job. But some of those people like Janet, who was running, was kind of like a right-hand man for Tim and scheduling different events and things that we're doing. I didn't know she was also this psychic feeding intel.
Wow.
And so I wonder if all that came out in the OUR investigation, that Tim had this kind of shadow organization within OUR that was advancing these ideas that Tom Harrison was feeding them.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it looks like to me.
That's what it looks like to me.
And I can't say that I know that for sure, but there's this, and there's the OUR stuff that they're doing, and then the shadow organization that is doing something totally different based on this supernatural spiritual connection, ketamine trips, talking to the dead prophet Nephi, and getting intel from Janet Russin. And I wasn't aware of any of that going on at the time, and probably not a lot of OUR operatives were. That's crazy. That's a weird world that he was living in.
Yeah. Let me play one more clip for you that also ties this together for me. In the lawsuit, it says, additionally, Ballard would get ketamine treatments and have a scribe come in with him while he would talk to the dead prophet Nephi and issue forth prophecies. Now, Janet Russin has made clear that she wasn't talking to Nephi. We're not that crazy. We're just talking to like Columbus, Harriet Tubman, and Tim's great-great-grandfather, Nephi Anderson, is a real person. His also name is Nephi. So I think that that does actually make a little bit more sense in terms of visions of glory, of like the theology of it, that Tim Ballard is, having some type of more manufactured, you could say, spiritual experiences than other people who have like near-death experiences. He's using ketamine to get his, and through that, he's able to communicate with the dead and with spirits. That's kind of where I think the ketamine comes in. So
Janet Russin said that he was talking to actual historical figures and not fictional historical figures like Nephi. Is she making that distinction?
No, I mean, they still believe that Nephi is a historical figure, but It's not the dead prophet Nephi. Tim was talking to his great-great-grandfather named Nephi Anderson.
Nephi. Interesting.
Yeah. Okay. Which of all of the things to point out, which is funny, she's like, let me make one clarification. Anyway.
Yeah. So that's what was concerning.
Yeah.
Which Nephi?
She's like, we're not that kooky.
Yeah. Well, I was just talking with a friend of mine who's an ER doctor about this whole situation. And she gives ketamine to people that come into the ER all the time. And she said that when the drug is being administered and it's about to take effect, she tells people, go to your happy place. What is your happy place? What is the most joyous? Is it riding your bike as a little girl down the street? Is it eating ice cream, your favorite ice cream, and watching your favorite show, whatever it is, because whatever's on the stage of your mind when the ketamine hits, that becomes reality for you. And that's what's so powerful about that drug. And so if Tim is thinking, I want to channel Nephi, channel Moroni, whatever, and then that drug hits, he's going to see Moroni.
Right.
That's how ketamine works. Anybody that works with it knows that. I didn't know that until I talked to this ER doctor friend of mine. And so, yeah, you want to see Nephi, you want to see whoever you want to see. You want to talk to Abraham Lincoln, be reading his book, be thinking about him, have him pictured in your mind when the ketamine hits your nervous system, and you get to talk to Abraham Lincoln.
Pin in that, okay, of whatever is on your mind, of what I think you put all of those things together of what is on Tim Ballard's mind, not just, what he wants to channel, but the structure of OUR is a main focus of what he talks about in like the readings that Janet Russin has. The structure of OUR, how to accomplish these goals that we're all talking about. Pin in that for a second, because I have a gigantic point that I want to make.
So these ideas about Tim being president of the United States and future prophet of the church, those ideas are planted in Tim, and then Tim wants to know, how do I accomplish that? And then he goes on ketamine to get the inspiration and stuff. Boom. That's where the whiteboard probably came from. That's where he's like, okay, I now have a vision of how all this stuff comes to pass, comes to fruition. I don't know if it went down that way. I'm just speculating. But dude, you introduce ketamine into this, and then who knows where it's going to take you.
I have a gigantic point to make. You're going to have to wait just 1 second. Yeah. You're right on, though. Ballard would get ketamine treatments and have a scribe come in with him while he would talk to the dead prophet Nephi and issue forth prophecies about Ballard's greatness and future as a United States senator, president of the United States, and ultimately the prophet of Ballard's church, to usher in the second coming of Jesus Christ. And it says, he feels he is stepping outside of himself. He is himself 100% while in K state, while in K ultimate truth serum can say all he needs to say. God speaks to him, asking God, Nephi, Tom Harrison, and angels. That is quite the statement. So the people that he is channeling, Tom Harrison is one of them.
He's up there with God, angels, Tom Harrison.
Do you hear what I'm saying right now?
That's huge.
That's huge, right? Do not miss the Tom Harrison aspect of this, all right? Oh. I have a gigantic point I'm leading to as well. Tom Harrison, who are you, blank sister Catherine? So I'm going to move on for a second. That's just kind of an example of what's going through his mind.
That is an actual transcript.
That is a transcript of one of the,
for the scribes.
Right.
Wow.
So here is an example of one of the blessings that Tom Harrison gave Tim and it says, this is in the lawsuit, and it says, I am second witness, Ken. So Ken Krogh is witness to this blessing. And in Mormonism, sometimes they will, like a patriarchal blessing, somebody will give you a blessing. There'll be a tape recorder, and then somebody will transcribe it and write it down so you can keep it. I also was thoughtful, and I included a picture from your documentaries with Tim.
Thanks.
So you filmed that picture?
Yeah, that's a very nice setting. That's at Gettysburg.
Yeah, it looks very nice. So it says, to Tim through Tom, I am a second witness, meaning Ken Krogh, dated Saturday, August 5th, 2023. So not too long ago. And it says, as the ministers of God to administer to his children, you have been called by apostolic decree. That's a big statement. Bam. It takes much patience and affliction, distress, and necessities to accomplish such responsibilities and foreordinations as you have been called. Called of what? By his armor of righteousness, he will go before you on your right and your left, before you to dispel falsehoods and be at your rearward to defend your back. You have felt like dying, yet behold, you live to fight another day for the salvation of his children and the covenants he has made with the nation. Interesting. The covenants with the children. The covenant that will save the remnant of America. The abandonment of righteous ideals, the Constitution hangs in the balance of unrighteous leaders and the selfish desires of conspiring men and women. They will not slumber or sleep before the battle is won, their battle and yours being one. United is the righteous deliverance of the captive, valiant and true. Sounds so similar to what the ideas were inside, like Lori and Chad Daybell's. Their battles and yours is one. It is all for this X purpose that I have defined. You are held up by faith, prophecy, and foreordination to do this work. I am with you always, your Savior, Redeemer, and friend. Your battle is mine. Your ways are becoming my ways. The fact that you have been given many priesthood blessings by your father, brother, President Ballard, and others was very evident and important. It was emphasized by the Spirit for me to consider that this combining was taking place. This confluence made the whole stronger and were prepared in a way that made them easier for your spirit and body to digest, incorporate, and integrate them into one. The legions of righteous spirits from the other side were evident and spoken of in the blessing. Many had gathered for the purpose of this blessing to cheer and grieve with you. They had and still are pleading with Father on behalf of you, Catherine, and your family's spiritual and physical welfare. Dark forces that are now conspiring against you and have been for a year or longer were made evident, and they were rebuked in the name of Jesus Christ to return from whence they came and no longer have the power to disturb your peace. You were instructed to no longer go to their place of dwelling and operation. A reason you are suffering so severely is that you do not live, think, and function as they do, and that you can no longer waste your spiritual or physical time and energy trying to discover their hellish plans and schemes, but that you will soon rise above them, so their plans will be totally frustrated and brought to naught. These forces, both earthly bound and evilly possessed, are united to bring you down to their level, darkness and dysfunction. By the power of the priesthood, in the name of Jesus Christ, they were rebuked that the dark influences inside of you and outside of you were cast out and sent on their way. These evil minions have placed blockages, stumbling blocks, and diversions upon the path that the Lord has set for you. You were blessed that their ways will be frustrated. The stumbling blocks directed at you were removed, and all their work will come to naught. The adversary is unsuccessfully trying to thwart the work that God has planned for you to accomplish. It feels to you like their power is great. D&C 8488, and whosoever receiveth you, there I will be also, for I will go before your face. I will be on your right hand and on your left, and my spirit shall be in your hearts, and mine angels round you to bear you up. You are a gift given to Christ by the Father, which will be tested in the furnace of affliction to rise above the precepts of men and take your rightful place. And then at the bottom it says, you were protected against all opposition, that they will have no power over you. The law enforcement, the courts, police, and all who fight against you will be frustrated in their attempts. You will come forth triumphant and successful. Maybe Tom Harrison's ways got a little bit confused with Jesus, then got confused with Tim Ballard's ways, but Your battle is mine. Your ways are becoming my ways. Make now your heart my heart, your mind my mind. These things are uttered in righteousness and under the sacred and holy name of Jesus Christ. Amen. To be distributed to Tim and Todd and Ken and their dear spouses. You were telling me about some of the blessings that Tim explained to you that he got from different people within the church. Mm-hmm. Do you want to go into that?
Sure. Yeah. The big one was, and this happened before OUR was actually organized, but Tim was involved in the child exploitation, trafficking arena. And he was super conflicted about his work. He had to do and say things, as he described, that were reprehensible and immoral. And he felt regretful, or I don't know, guilty about some of the things he had to say, do, and places he needed to go to fight human trafficking. So that was a conflict that he had, and I explained to you that he went to the temple frequently to try and combat that darkness. Everything changed one day, though, when he met with Elder Ballard, and he got a blessing from him, in which Elder Ballard, and he explained this to me on a drive, Elder Ballard had given him a special blessing, which absolved him from guilt and responsibility for things he had to do while in the act of saving kids.
And you're saying this is before OUR.
This is
when he's at Homeland Security, probably.
Yeah.
And it sounds like he's looking at some graphic images of children possibly in his job, and it's getting to him.
That's how I interpreted it at the time. I'm like, okay, he has to look at pornography in general. He has to go to brothels and be in all these. That's how I interpreted what he was talking about, that he had to be in these really dark places and see a lot of sex workers in action. And so he felt tormented, I would say, about doing that. And that changed when Elder Ballard gave him a special blessing that absolved him from the need for repentance and from guilt around any immoral sins or things that he was involved in, as long as it was in the act of trying to save kids. And that
really opens up the door to what is the act of saving kids. So we're going to have a lot more information that I might blow your mind on. So I remember before we started and I showed you something about Visions of Glory, and I said, did Tom Harrison inspire the couple's ruse? Remember what I said at the beginning? Did that not shock you?
Yeah.
So I think we go back to we need to make sure to put these pieces together for people, because if you get a blessing like that, what doors is that opening to somebody in the pursuit of saving kids? So yeah, keep going.
Yeah. So at the time, obviously, I mean, one would think that doesn't open the door to, SAing women or something like that. Did it go that far? I don't know. That's what the lawsuit allegations are alleging. I'd really like to hear Tim's side of things. I wish he'd grant me an interview. That would be, I just driving here, I thought about that, and I was like, maybe we should have him on. And I think we'd probably have to chain you to the wall. I could do the questioning so that you didn't freak out on it.
What would be the top question you would ask Tim Ballard? You go and then I'll go.
Top question. Geez, that's a good question. That's I'd probably start. What's going on, dude? What's your life look like now? It's changed so much. And I'd ask him if he really believes, and I think I know the answer to this, if there's a secret cabal of pedophiles that are trying to take him down. And what evidence does he have for that? Because that's his assertion. And if there is, I want to know about that. If there isn't, then it's important to figure that out too. Because that's where his mind goes. Everything that I've seen in social media, and I talk to everybody, that anybody that denounces him or is working for the pedophile ring that are trying to keep their ex secret. And so, I mean, that's where his headspace is. And I'd like to know why he believes that and what evidence he has for that. And if there is evidence, I'm all ears. I want to hear about it. That's my first question. What's your first question?
Oh, mine is a little bit less open-minded to his answers. My question would be, Tim Ballard, why did you release this statement in the Spear Fund after these allegations came forward to say that the act of trying to take down sex traffickers pisses off the sex traffickers, and this is nothing new, and all while knowing full well that you had been taken out of your own organization, OUR, for the internal and external investigation into the claims of all of these various women, and acting like, why were you acting like you don't know who these people are? They're just, who are they? They know. Why did your wife go on the Rod Arquette show and say, we don't even know who these people are? We don't even know. There's some women, some allegations, and it's just the biz of being. Why did you say that when you knew full well who they were, and your lawyers had already spoken to them, and you were already kicked out of OUR and on your way to the Spear Fund? Why did you say that when you actually knew who they were, Tim? Was it because it's more convenient to point your audience that the sex traffickers are taking you down, or is it you just don't have any other answers? And then he would probably flip the table and take off his mic and leave. So that would be a very quick interview for us.
Yeah, it might not be the best opening question, but this blessing, we talked last time about the second anointing. I don't know if that was the second anointing, but sure sounds like it. Mm-hmm. That's all I can say about that.
Yeah, and we talked about the second anointing in pretty good detail, explaining what it was. So go back to part 1 and watch that. And combined with his close relationship with M. Russell Ballard and Tom Harrison, and the blessing that we can get into reading in a second, would you say that, I mean, I just feel like whether he had a literal second anointing ceremony or he had a blessing from an apostle and then somebody else that is like a total spiritual leader and his own mini prophet to some of these people like Tom Harrison, is it too far of a stretch to say that it had the same effect?
It sounds like the same thing.
Yeah. So whether it actually literally happened or not, these blessings within these Mormon circles can embolden people to do things. And even if, Tim, the women are totally wrong, it's never happened, I still would say that we have to look into the wider ramifications of teachings like visions of glory and what comes down the pipe from Salt Lake City and the prophets there.
And that's what's in the motion is, in the whole lawsuit, it's spiritual manipulation, I think is the words that the women use. They were spiritually manipulated in a way that was victim grooming, right from the very beginning, like looking back on it now from their perspective and seeing where the behavior ultimately ended up according to their testimony. And if there's spiritual manipulation, let's dissect what that was, what the teachings were. And I think you're right. It all goes back to what Elder Ballard created in Tim, his perception as a spiritual leader, and some of Tim's beliefs around Tom Harrison, visions of glory, doomsday, last day stuff. And that's where I can step in and give you some of my insights on how that developed. Do you want to go there now?
Yeah. Tell me where you want to go next. I just want to bring anybody back up to speed. You told me once that basically M. Russell Ballard made Tim Ballard and who he is with OUR, his book deals, and what he eventually accomplished, if we believe the allegations from the women, which I do believe the evidence supports, that's another statement that I hope you don't shy away from saying, but you can put it into your own words. But no. I believe you on that M. Russell Ballard, the apostle of the Mormon church, possibly made like a criminal, a psychopath, a rapist. I don't know.
Yeah, that's pretty strong language. I'm not going to shy away from that statement because it's what I saw over 7 years of being involved in this, is that everything got ran by Elder Ballard. Tim dropped Elder Ballard's name like it was an involuntary cough. everywhere he went. And all of a sudden, after 7 years of doing this, the church comes out and says, no, he didn't have any authorization to use Elder Ballard's name. I'm like, wait, but this has been going on for years. And Elder Ballard has been a silent partner, but a very active partner in the executive producer function of the career of Tim Ballard. And I witnessed that firsthand. So a lot of other people did this. I mean, there's a lot of people that had a lot more meetings with Elder Ballard than I did, and were involved in this. And if they come forward, I mean, I think the motion in the lawsuit actually, I don't know who gave them that information, but that's what it alleges, is this very close working relationship between Elder Ballard and Tim Ballard. And without Elder Ballard, there wouldn't be a Tim Ballard. Nobody would know about him. He would be this obscure book author, and that is advancing kind of fringe Mormon ideas, making some historical claims that are questionable. And I don't think he wouldn't have taken off the way he did, especially if you put into context that the donors for OUR predominantly came from Mormon, Utah families and wealthy individuals. And all of those connections, most of them, I should say, came from Elder Ballard. In fact, I was going through my email just a couple of days ago, and I found some interesting things that I hadn't thought about. And one of them was an email from Tim asking me about this woman named Alice, I believe her name was, that he's like, hey, this woman, Alice, came up to me. She said that she wants to introduce me to Elder Ballard, and that, do you know her? And asking me if I knew who this person was, and if I had already set up that meeting. And so that was early on. Once Elder Ballard got involved, Tim's career took off. OUR took off. He was involved in the very beginnings of that. So that's all super well documented. There's a lot of people that know that story besides me. And that's the reality of the situation.
I have on good evidence. You can have your own evidence of what you think. I think for sure he has been excommunicated. And I've heard that his family still attends their regular home ward. And it would be interesting to be like, well, what are you going to do now? Where are you going to go, Tim Ballard, if you're not able to actually attend the church? And that's going to be something that I think he's going to have to answer for if he does join another religion. Do you still believe these things? You were a Heartlander. You went on these Book of Mormon evidence tours. You believe all of these things up until you got excommunicated. Are they still not literal beliefs of yours just because you got kicked out of the church? And like you said, there's many different branches. This is the Brighamite branch, technically, of the LDS church. So I'd be interested to know if he still actually believes things about the restoration. Great Abominable Church, maybe not so much, but yeah, if he still believes Joseph Smith, restoration.
Yeah, that'd be question number 2 for our interview.
Yeah, all right. Tim Ballard, you can sit down. I'll go easy on you. Just tell me about what your beliefs in Mormonism are,
Yeah. And if they're involving, I'd be super interested to hear about that too. If they're involving towards other branches of Christianity, what is there that's attractive?
It's definitely still probably believes in some type of modern day revelation, modern day prophets. God's still talking to us, probably mostly him. So you were also telling me that Elder Ballard had some specific instructions of talks that he wanted you to read and give you some more backing as to why this work is so important.
Yeah. So in that meeting I had with him, Elder Ballard gave us a homework assignment to go read and study a talk given by Spencer W. Kimball. The message of the talk was that anytime the brethren and the church needed to advance in some way in the world for missionary efforts, God would bless us with the technology to do that. And Elder Ballard was like paraphrasing this talk to us in this meeting. And it would say that when the church was growing large enough that the brethren needed to go to other countries and reach out to these branches that were forming in other parts of the world, God gave us airplanes so that they could do that. When genealogy needed to make a leap forward in finding names and records so that temple work could be done for ancestors, that's why God gave us the internet. And that's what this talk by Spencer W. Kimball talks about, in which he says that we need to use the airwaves, or talked about the transistor, the invention of the transistor. That's just for a few bucks, somebody could get a radio and hear the message of the gospel, or the message of the restored gospel.
Hope it's not used against you guys.
Yeah.
Hope it doesn't lead to somebody creating any podcasts or anything. Anyway,
yeah.
Continue.
Or for the advancement of the porn industry. Another subject. But yeah, that's what this talk is about, is using mass communication for advancing the church and the missionary efforts. And so Elder Ballard was telling us about this talk, and paraphrasing that, all these inventions from the Industrial Revolution all the way today were all orchestrated by God for the specific needs of the church and their missionary efforts. And he had us review this talk that was given in the 70s to bolster that claim. Now, I don't think it gets any more egocentric than that.
Mm-mm.
It just doesn't. Like, everything in the world that happens for the benefit of mankind was put in place to advance the interests of the church. That's what Elder Ballard says. That's what this talk says. And that's pretty egocentric. I mean, we thought that American exceptionalism was pretty egocentric, and the imperialistic endeavors of America. This goes beyond that all of mankind is the purpose and the effort of the entire history of mankind and civilization, and the advancement is all so that temples could be restored and salvation could be given to the family of Adam. And so that's a pretty egocentric position to take. I don't know how you walk away from that.
And what connection do you feel like what root do you think that takes in the minds of these Mormon men as they do the things they do? In my opinion, if your church is that correct, that the whole world centers around what your God wants to bring forth to restore his one true church, but obviously I got opinions about that. Now, you could have made it a little more clear by not having the rock in the hat with the polygamist. I could go on a rant about, God, you could have tried some easier ways to make it more believable, but what do you think what kind of psychological factors do you think that puts in somebody's mind when they think their church is that correct?
Well, the fruits of that are ideas like what Elder Oak says: it's wrong to criticize the brethren of the church, even if the criticism is true, because they are on the Lord's errand, trying to advance the human family and salvation for everybody. And so if that's what's happening, coming out and criticizing them is frustrating that work. And Tim did a good job of trying to make the same argument that if anybody's criticizing him, they're working for the pedophiles. If anybody's criticizing the LDS church, it's because they're working for Satan.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah,
it's the same lane.
It's the same argument. It's the same. And so it dissuades any sort of criticism or critical thinking, honestly, about endeavors, whether it's OUR or whether it's the LDS church or whether it's the finances or anything else. It's kind of this overarching argument that if the membership can believe that, then they don't want to be in the position of frustrating God's purposes. And we have scriptures in the Doctrine and Covenants that say things like, man cannot stop the work of God any more than his puny arm put into the Missouri River will try and stop the Missouri River.
Right.
That's pretty demeaning, and it manifests itself all across the relationship between the membership and the leadership. And that's why I still have a hard time mentally and emotionally saying that the church's statement was a lie about throwing Tim under the bus and claiming no business relationships.
Sorry, everyone.
Especially when our mission was to families or struggling women and children. Sometimes the brethren were called upon just to perform ordinances when the mission had reached that stage. Sometimes we posed as fellow wanderers, as husband and wife, or other roles.
Yeah, and this is something that I was just listening on 1.5 speed.
Yeah.
And notice, I want to play it again. It's sort of Tom Harrison predicting or prophesying the couple's ruse, right?
Right.
And I just want people to listen again. He's saying that they pretend as they're gallivanting around the world in apocalyptic pre-millennial America.
Gathering people
As 144,000. Sometimes they have to pretend
to be husband and wife.
I'm going to play it again.
Especially when our mission was to families or struggling women and children.
That is so
Sometimes the brethren were called upon just to perform ordinances when the mission had reached that stage. Sometimes we posed as fellow wanderers.
Not only that is, this mission of salvation of what we're doing to build temples, gathering, Zion, everything that we've described, that's a mission to Latter-day Saints and stuff. And so Tim Ballard's ideas about how he's going to accomplish the goals of OUR, when, as we've talked about previously, the people that he's kept around him, they're not specialists and, these hardcore ex-Navy SEALs, like he's done a lot of propaganda in his videos. There are a lot of people who don't want to question him. And so the actual background that he had, whether in the CIA or Homeland Security, he probably didn't have the resources and the knowledge and the training to do the type of ops that he wanted to do. So it was a lot more about sizzle. And like you talked about in your story with the gun and the holster, and Tim not really looking for the best practices of what would make people the most safe. Can't actually take these guns into a foreign country. Has a lot more to do with ops and raising a lot of money from people for all the reasons that we spoke about in our last episode. But when actual push comes to shove, Tim is in this position, people saying, you are like some kind of prophet. You are the guy. If Tom Harrison is telling him very early on that you are blessed and set apart to do these things. So when again did you say that blessing, that like Tim talked about that blessing? What year was that?
When he met Tom,
yeah,
and Tom got involved. That was really early on I don't know specifically what year, but it was right after OUR was founded.
Yeah,
for sure.
So you're hearing what I'm saying here. You have somebody like Tom Harrison and Tim Ballard get connected. Tom Harrison says, you are this person and you have an extremely important role to play in the second coming of Jesus Christ. And then OUR is born out of this. He's getting connected with these psychics and things like that. But his actual way of moving to get these things done, they're not through the healthiest practices. They're not with the healthiest people, because that's not really what it's about. It's about the overall bigger structure. Perhaps it's about, like you said, with Tom Harrison and him saying that Tim needs to have this structure to contain all of these kids in the last days. Maybe children need families and that nonprofit. Maybe that is all just part of one thing kind of leading to another container. But at the end of the day, if the person who is starting all of these different containers and not leading to the best practices in so many other arenas that we know about, this one with Tim, I would say that Tom Harrison and M. Russell Ballard are the people who made Tim who he is today. And if he's reading Visions of Glory, and like he was saying to you, oh, have you read this book? Spencer reached out to me. You're looking up to that person like they know their shit. They have a special mission for you. They have these special blessings for you. And then through the course of what Tim is trying to accomplish with OUR, he gets it in his head from Visions of Glory and from Tom Harrison. He gets it in his head that to make this mission possible, at the end of the day, the big picture is this containment for children. The big picture is the second coming of Jesus Christ. If what he's saying is to get that mission accomplished one way or another, you have wives in previous lives, you have spiritual wives, you have a way where to accomplish this mission, you pretend to be a wife, husband and wife with somebody else. And on top of that, Tim Ballard in the document, in the lawsuit, there's evidence that he was supposed to be obeying the couple's ruse. And Janet Rustin said, the rules are basically whatever you want to make them. They're very arbitrary. Right. So like with all of what I just said, that I think is how Tim Ballard was created, thinking that to accomplish this mission that the apostle of the Mormon Church gave him and Tom Harrison gave him to accomplish that. That's why we see this trail of destruction right now.
And if you don't see that that's a problem, just go back to the Chad and Lori Daybell situation where Chad believed that Lori was a wife of his in a previous life, and that justified everything that they did. They used that as justification, and that idea, they got it from Tom Harrison. It appears that maybe Tim got his ideas for the couple ruse from Tom Harrison, and look at where that took both of those people's lives.
And I will also one-up you on that, and I will say that that's an excellent point about look what happened to JG and Tylee and the other adults that were murdered in this case. That's literal murder, and that is what they thought they needed to accomplish because of X, Y, and Z reason. They're zombies, they're dark spirits. They're fine. Whatever I need to do to them, it's okay, because in these spiritual circles, you will have types of confirmation bias. If you really believe that your near-death experience or a blessing that was put upon you, you're going to look for signals of what your brain wants to say. So going back to the thing about ketamine, all right? If what's on Tim's brain when he's going into this is everything I just said, save the world, have a container for kids, do all of these things, and he's got the ideas about sometimes you need to pretend to be husband and wife to accomplish things. That is like kind of a doctrine of visions of glory, that's how we get the work done. If that's what's in Tim Ballard's mind when he's going into these ketamine spiritual states, that is what's going to be given back to him. And that's what he's going to go give back and say more emphatically, non-questioned, this is the revelation that I was getting. It's just going to be a circular loop back into what all of the messages that were already on his mind, leading him to abuse these women, all the way to the point of, as the lawsuit alleges, literally penetrating and raping at least 2 of them. That is what's come out of that. And let me add one more thing with Lori and Chad. They believed that murder was the way to accomplish, and that there's no guilt in this. This is what needed to be done. I would say to the camera that Tim Ballard, just in the same way that he's like, would you do anything to save kids? You know how he says that in the lawsuit, the women allege, like, what would you do to save kids, right? Like, well, you can trust me. This is what we do. We need to role play husband and wife in this. All of the things that all of the things that the women allege in the lawsuit that Tim needed to do for chemistry, to save the kids, to fool the traffickers. I would also say that same line of thinking is what Tim is now doing to have a character assassination of all of the women. Bringing it back full circle. Okay. Whatever needs to be done. He's still that guy. He might have been excommunicated from the church, but he's still those promises, those blessings of what he's supposed to accomplish. I don't think that he's been dissuaded of it at all, and that these are still necessary actions he needs to take. Why did you call the women sex traffickers when you know exactly who they are because of these internal and external investigations at OUR that led to all these things? He is not only so convinced that he needed to do those things, he's so convinced that anyone who brings him down, they are the dark spirits. They're the ones who are stopping him from bringing forth the fulfillment of the second coming and all of the things that have been promised to him. So it is just a spiritual narcissist on full blast, turned all the way up, charging straight forward, doesn't care who they have to do. And so in one case, there's literal murder. And I think in this one, there's a whole other path of destruction, character assassination to accomplish what members of the top leadership of the LDS Church have told Tim Ballard his mission is. That's my whole point.
And what you're saying is how it looks. That's the story that's emerged. And if that's not the story, then I want to hear from Tim. I want to get that. And if that's not the story, you know who else knows the probably the whole story is Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And all they've issued is a statement that his behavior is morally reprehensible. What does that mean? What was it that's morally reprehensible about his behavior? I'd love to hear more from there, because what you're describing is what it looks like to everybody that's watching this on the outside.
Go ahead.
Where you're coming from, where I'm coming from, is there are people that we care about deeply in the church. It's always going to be part of our lives. And so it's important for us to make the church a better place. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, a better place and less harmful. And Lauren Matheson is a great example of that. She's the first person that I came across that is in the church, but is calling out, hey, these things, there are teachings that have led to serious crimes being committed. We need to have an open conversation about that. Yeah. Is it critical of the leadership? Is it critical of the doctrines? Absolutely. But it's an important conversation we need to have. So I would like to see active members of the church stand up like Lauren Matheson and say, hey, some of these doctrines, some of these ideas, they can be dangerous and they can be divisive for families. They can obviously lead to crimes being committed. And even though it's critical of the church and the leadership, it's an important conversation we need to have. And if members of the church want to keep the church in a place that it's helpful to families and out of the true crime news, we need to have these conversations, these hard conversations about the doctrine.
Yeah. People have been saying, like, if what happens with the Tim Ballard lawsuits, possible like criminal charges coming out with that and so many other things like Jody Hildebrandt and this Lori and Chad Daybell case, the Mormon church is maybe going to ask for like a social media fast or something. And that's kind of what I'm obsessed with right now is how is the church going to react to so many things that are coming out that to me prove that there is no discernment, that these beliefs are really dangerous, and that the people that get promoted within the church and are selling books for Deseret Book, who are closest to the leaders, who have blessings from the leaders, that not only do they lack discernment, but the church itself makes these people and then tries to silence, victims that come out of these situations that they make. So this is going to be a very big deal, I think, like a gigantic moment in the history of Mormonism, what we're experiencing right now.
Yeah.
And one way or another, people need to be aware of it and then, interact hopefully with your ecclesiastical leaders, your priesthood leaders in an appropriate way, because as we know from like Jody Hildebrandt and Tom Harrison and stuff, that the church will, be their number one supplier of clients, their number one promoter, and have an actual conversation about what your relationship with the church should be when they obviously let these, I don't know what else, psychopaths slip by them and promote so many harmful messages and ruin so many lives. It's not just Tim Ballard. It's a whole system to me.
Yeah. I mean, Tim was embracing the beliefs of Tom Harrison, and Tim, he's not a general authority, but he was Deseret Book's #1 author. And some of those beliefs were woven into his books, and he's endorsed by a general authority. So it's not like these are fringe ideas that are out there. They're, maybe people like Tom Harrison or maybe like Chad and Lori Daybell and the Hildebrands and stuff have taken those and ran them off a cliff, taking them to extremes. But you got to look at where those ideas came from and have a conversation about whether those are true, whether they're productive or whether they're dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And as I see it right now, the brethren of the church, I don't think are, I think they're disconnected from reality on what these ideas are doing, percolating in Mormon culture. And I saw that like when I had my meeting with Elder Ballard, I was trying to show him stuff on that I was working on online, and send him materials that he could watch on his iPad, and he didn't even know how to use an iPad. He's like, well, send it to my secretary. She'll bring things up. And so I don't think Elder Ballard even like ever got on the internet and knew how to navigate the internet from what I saw.
Mm-hmm. But he knows how to take credit for it.
Take credit for the internet. Right. Take credit for it. And that's not to knock him. I mean, my own father-in-law never used email at all. But what I'm trying to highlight is that if all the information they're getting is from their committees that are surrounding them, that's not a good, accurate picture of what's happening out here in the real world. And and the conversation that we're having and the conversation critical of some of these teachings, I only see it taking place in ex-Mormon Reddit groups and ex-Mormon podcasts like yours and Mormon Stories. And that's tragic and so not productive, because I really think active members of the church ought to take a more active role in talking about some of these harmful practices. And I think getting behind the dangerous ideas from Visions of Glory is something that most Mormons would be like, yeah, we need to probably not bring up in Relief Society the subject of devils possessing our kids through when they see pornographic images on their phones, and you know, be careful about that. But if anything's that's brought up that's critical of the church, the doctrine, or the leadership, we're trained to shy away and say, oh, that's anti-Mormon stuff, that's anti-kingdom of God, we can't even talk about it. That's a problem. If the Mormon church wants to survive this information age, they need to have a free-flowing conversation that's not restricted, and not try and restrict the information, because you can't do it anymore. You can't restrict the information anymore. And so the only thing you can hope to do is steer the conversation in a productive way. But we're not even allowed to have the conversation right now. And that's like going to be the downfall of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. If it crashes, and by a lot of metrics, it's crashing right now in younger generations, it's going to come because they won't even enter the conversation.
Yeah, all of that is super good points. And I'll just offer the problem and the roadblocks to me is that between like Tom Harrison, Ken Krogh, saying that Jody Hildebrand, I guess, that the number one problem that face Latter-day Saints today is addiction in their minds. And so if you go after something as pervasive and ubiquitous as pornography or anything that they view as sexual sin, then you have an endless supply of people who feel broken, who feel shamed, who are on this cycle, who need you to come back in. And so it's just not going to ever be a conversation that they really want to have, because it has to start with, how the teachings about addiction and about pornography and about sexuality are not really rooted in some of the best practices. And you can look at that between, who they excommunicate and who they keep in the church. Ballard would also claim to his female ruse partners that if his wife Catherine were to die, he would immediately marry them. Ballard told one of his victims that when his wife would question what Ballard was doing with these women, Ballard would tell his wife that his female partners kept falling in love with him and wanted to kill Catherine so that they could be together. If we're bringing in Visions of Glory, if we're bringing in Chad Daybell, Lori Vallow, I think in Tim Ballard's mind, he is preying on these women, manipulating them, and saying that they're special. They have something that this organization can use to help save kids. Now, it's not just his sexual gratification, that these spirits are connected. Like, our meeting is preordained, that with what Visions of Glory explains in the book, that sometimes on this mission of life to bring about the second coming of Jesus Christ here on this earthly plane, that sometimes we have to role play as husband and wife. If Catherine believes all the same things that Tim does, that these couples' ruses, it's not just necessary for the operation of saving sex traffickers, because as we already know, even the top people at OUR have said that this in no way, shape, or form constitutes an actual healthy practice that we want to implement going forward that brings about any results to get sex trafficked kids. So we already know the couple's ruse from its own admission at OUR does not work. And the sexual gratification of Tim Ballard, that's already plain to see. But if his wife Catherine believes that this is okay because the women that he is seeking after are spirits that Tim has connected with in previous lives, and that they are on this mortal plane to bring about the second coming, whether Catherine knows exactly how far sexually, down to the rape and the penetration and all of those things that Tim was actually doing with them, it's perfectly in line to think that if you read Visions of Glory and you understand Tom Harrison and all of his degenerate people who follow his teachings, that if Catherine Ballard is on board with that, at one point, these are past earth wives, yippee hooray, these are the spirits that you're going to connect with to fulfill this mission and bring about this great work. But oops, oh no, they're actually dark spirits. They're actually so bad that they want to kill Catherine. They want to come after her. So it's not just some narcissist who's like, all of my exes are crazy and like they want to murder my wife because they want to be with me. It's not just a narcissist thinking that the whole world revolves around him. It is core to the doctrines, you could say, of Visions of Glory, of Tom Harrison, that these evil spirits, they would go as far as to kill somebody. You can go as far as to kill somebody in the pursuit of righteousness, and you can go as far as to kill somebody in the pursuit of this greater order that needs to come to pass. I think that is the paradigm that this marriage is operating within. And that's a dangerous, fine line to walk. But Tim is foreordained. Tim is the guy who can do it. And he can overcome this stuff. That whatever you're saying and doing, God goes before you. And so if you are engaging with like this darkness, these spirits, your role playing is this, you don't need to worry. God is already before you. You're foreordained behind you, and God, Jesus Christ, are in front of you to bring about this mission. So play in this middle space, play with these dark spirits to the point where it says, so somewhere between the evening of January 7th to the early morning of January 8th, 2022, Tim came over to my home. So this is, I believe, the statement, the testimony from, don't quote me for sure, but I'm pretty sure this is Kira Lynch, who was one of the hairdressers that Tim got on board to do the couple's ruse. He came over because he needed me to cut his hair. He was going on vacation with his family. I don't remember where they were going, but they were going down a cruise for, I believe, a week or two somewhere. He was really nervous about going and being away for that long. He said he had just done some intense therapy with the military. He was hoping that he would be good mentally. When he arrived at my house, he seemed very intense and out of sorts. He was pacing in my living room. He looked stressed out. He was a little red in the face, and he started breathing heavily, like he was having a panic attack. I told him to sit down, so he sat on my couch. I put my hand on his chest and kind of started rubbing it. I told him to just breathe. He started calming down, and I gave him a hug. He pulled me in closer and nuzzled his head into my neck, and he started kissing my neck. I felt like he was in a delicate state, so I was trying to be gentle. I told him, Tim, you're okay. It's okay. He said, no, this is what I want. So starting to kiss her neck. I said, it's not what you want. This is not what you want. I stood up and sat on the couch on the other side of him. He came over and kneeled in front of me and asked me if I believed if we came back reincarnated as people in different lifetimes. I told him that I had never thought about that before, and he said that he did. I'm going to keep on reading. I think this links everything together. I want to read this story. I want to make as much noise for these women as possible. Heavy trigger warning as I go forward. He said he believed that he and I had been married in a different life. He said this is why he was so physically attracted to me and emotionally attracted to me. He asked if Catherine ever died or they were ever to get divorced, did I think we could get married? I wasn't really saying anything. I was in shock and a little bit nervous about what he was saying to me. I asked him what was going on and what was going through his head. He was still kneeling in front of me and pulled me closer. He put his hand underneath my shirt in the back and started to pull at my shirt. About a month before that, I had a boob job and I told him to stop. Tim, that hurts. He said, I'll be careful. I still didn't have a lot of strength. I was nervous. I didn't want to hurt myself, but I did not want him to hurt me. I was really nervous about the situation for many reasons. I was trembling. I asked him multiple times to stop. He kept asking me, just trust me. You can trust me right now. All I could think to say was just stop and ask him what was going on. He still had his hands underneath my shirt and pulled it off the top of my head. He said, I just want to see. Just let me see. At this point, he unclipped the back of my bra. I was trying to get up from the couch. I told him that he was hurting me. I wanted to get up. He was standing over me, so I was having a hard time standing up. I turned over on my stomach and finally stood up. I was standing up. He took his shirt off and grabbed me and hugged me. He said, I just need to feel you. I need to be skin to skin. I was honestly terrified. I was not sure what to do. I felt scared, nervous. I said, Tim, this isn't you. He yelled a bit and he said, I don't even know who I am. Nothing feels like me. I said, Tim, this isn't you. He started getting more aggressive. I tried to back away. I was hoping he would put his shirt on. Instead, he started following me. I started walking towards my front door with my shirt and bra still off. I had no idea where he put them. He told me, I know you want me. He took off his belt and started pulling his pants down. Trigger warning of the century. This is all for a point, okay? I was backing up against my stairs. Before I could even get a few steps, he grabbed me and pushed himself on top of me, so I was lying on my back against the stairs. With one hand, he held my hands above my head with force. With his other hand, he pulled down my leggings to my knees or calves. I remember so clearly thinking, just squeeze your legs so tight so nothing can happen. I don't remember if his pants were all the way off or just halfway down. His penis was erect. He started grinding on me. I kept squeezing my legs as closed as tight as I could keep them. I was starting to feel my body freeze up. His penis was now rubbing in between the labia. I felt very trapped. I wanted to disappear from this moment. At this point, I started crying, begging him to stop. He moved his hands to put underneath my butt and pull me closer to his penis. I remember him lifting his hips up straight above mine, then pulled me in more. That's when his penis penetrated my vagina. I went into shock. I feel like it almost wasn't my body. I'm not sure why, but I just laid there. I felt like my mind had so many thoughts racing. At this point, my whole body felt numb everywhere. I was not sure how many times he penetrated, not sure how long until I came back into my body. As soon as I was present enough to the hell that was happening to me, I was able to move my arms. I freed them from his grasp and grabbed his face. I grabbed his face, just begging him to stop. I said so many times, please stop. He stood up and tucked his penis in his pants, zipped his pants up, grabbed his shirt, and walked out my front door. I quickly received a text after he left reminding me to call Matt about getting help with police for my ex. He told me he would be praying for me. Then a couple hours later, he must have realized he left his belt at my house. He was very concerned about that. He texted me a couple times and called me. So I just left it on the porch for him. I started questioning what happened. I started feeling really sick a lot. I was sad a lot. My dad passed away a couple of weeks later. It was much for me to think about. Anytime it popped into my mind, I would push it away. I was afraid. I refused to think about it until June 2023. I was at the CEO fight nights up in Salt Lake. I first saw Blaine, Tim's son. We said hi. He introduced me to his wife. Then he yells across the table, "Dad, look who's here." I could not understand the look of terror when he saw me. He looked mortified. After I saw him, my body wouldn't stop trembling. I was feeling so sick. I had a headache come on really quick. I ran to the bathroom and started puking. Now I know my body was trying to tell me something was severely wrong. I couldn't figure it out, and I couldn't stop thinking about it for weeks after. Anytime I would try to think about it, I kept having weird flashbacks and would get really sick again. And again, somewhere along the line, Tim said, allegedly, that he came over and kneeled in front of me and asked me if I believed we came back reincarnated as other people in different lifetimes. I told him that I had never thought about that before, and he told me he believed in that. So maybe the blessings from Tom Harrison, maybe the approval of these blessings and endorsement from so many of these high-level Mormon leaders, these people made Tim believe maybe whatever ketamine was telling him, whatever his boner was telling him, that these women were special spirits, and maybe when they're not so special anymore, they're dark spirits, they're possessed, and they're out to kill my wife. There's a lot of things going on right now that I also can't speak to, but I feel like with Ryan over here, these are the missing pieces of the puzzle that I kind of wanted to connect for people maybe that hasn't been connected before. So huge thank you to Ryan, my new bud. Hopefully we'll be making more videos and more things will come out. So in going along with why it's important to have this conversation and what the pushback might be from, people in my audience of what we're saying right now, or Mormons themselves about visions of glory. Hey, this is not like it's, doctrine of the church or something, and trying to put these connections a little bit more to a fine point on them. I want to play a clip really quick where John DeLynn explains this.
The LDS Church is not on trial for this book. They didn't write it, publish it, and they are not associated with it in any way. Come on, bitter boy. I'm not upset that you write that, Mile High Cowboy, but I do want to give you a thoughtful, respectful response. I've been watching Mormon intellectual thought and culture for at least 40 years. And at BYU, I watched Maxine Hanks, Levina Fielding Anderson, Avram Gileadi, others, Paul Toscano, all get excommunicated by the Mormon Church and or denounced for books that they published, or for public statements that they made, or for the influence that they had. Fast forward to the past 10 years. I've watched Bill Reel, Sam Young get excommunicated for simply advocating for children. I've watched Natasha Helfer get excommunicated for promoting healthy, ethically based, psychological, therapeutical practices. Others, Jeremy Runnels, myself, have been excommunicated for either encouraging the church to be open about its history, supporting same-sex marriage, etc. No, the Mormon Church did not publish or write Visions of Glory, but they absolutely could and should denounce it and excommunicate Tom Harrison, versus what they actually did, which was promote him to bishop when they discovered that he was the author of this book. And so I'm going to also share the comment made by J.C. Hanna, which is, the church needs to denounce this book. I would say if Sam Young deserves excommunication, Natasha Helfer, Jeremy Runnels, all the other people, if they deserve excommunication. I'm not aware of Sam Young, his teachings leading to murder. I'm not aware of Natasha Helfer's teachings leading to murder, mine or Jeremy Runnels, or any of the September 6th. But we do know that about Brother Harrison.
Yeah, he makes a really good point. The ideas in Visions of Glory, like, some people believe them, some people don't. The problem is that people believe them and they take them and they run them off a cliff. And were those the ideas that led Tim down a dark path? I don't know. There's a lot of people that came into OUR and into Tim's sphere to promote him and his message that we thought was a good thing. Obviously, saving kids is a good thing. Then Tim gets a hold of some of these ideas and these delusions of grandeur that may have come from Tom. And he took this whole movement that I put part of my life to. A lot of other OUR operatives and people put their life work and time and energy into. And we deserve some answers, whether that came from these dangerous ideas or not, because it's left a wake of damage and a wake of hurt people in this graveyard of Tim Ballard. And if that is the case, the church has a responsibility for that. If Elder Ballard was supporting these ideas, then the church bears responsibility for any of that. And if that's not the case, then the church needs to come out and tell us what's going on. Why is Tom Harrison? Why are these ideas still out there floating and not being denounced?
Mm-hmm. Why are they not being denounced? Why are they not being denounced? Why are they expecting us just to ignore this pattern of destruction? We're catching on to you.
It leads me to believe that they're not being denounced because it's rooted in fundamental Mormon doctrine. Statements from Joseph Smith and Brigham Young that have been perpetuated over, the last 185 years into modern day rhetoric that I see coming from President Nelson. And it'd take a lot to walk back some of this extremist doctrines and views. But it's got to be done. I mean, you at least need to steer the membership in a way that doesn't lead them down a path of some of these extremist ideas. And I mean, I'm not in the Mormon leadership. And so I don't know what should be done. I think John makes a great point. At the very least, denounce the extreme forms of this doctrine with Visions of Glory and how that all got down. Because, I mean, one thing that happens is in the Visions of Glory, he talks about a plague that hits the United States and the world, and all these people are dying, and you have to zip up your family members in body bags before the pus explodes and these boils and infects you. And it's this horrible, awful, tragic scene. People were freaking out when COVID hit, thinking that that's what was going to happen. I personally know people that moved to the mountains of Montana trying to flee this plague, thinking that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
That it was going to wipe out everybody, well, large portions of society, as prophesied in Visions of Glory. So that's having real effect in people's lives. I mean, that's a real effect. This person I know took him, his wife, and his little kid and joined some commune in the mountains up north. And last I heard, and it totally disconnected from society, like nobody's heard from him. But last I heard is that him and his wife split up, probably over varying opinions on whether this was really the second coming of Jesus Christ or not.
Mm-hmm.
So all I can say is, from my perspective, is these ideas, these teachings, these prophecies are having real effect in real people's lives. And I believe, as John points out, that the LDS has a responsibility in either own it or denounce it. Don't give ambiguous statements, and just like let it percolate out in Mormon culture and see what comes of it. And if something bad comes from it, people like that commenter says, well, hey, the church is not on trial for visions of glory. They have nothing to do with it. Okay, if they don't believe it and if they see it as a harmful thing, then denounce it, because they absolutely do have a responsibility there, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting getting into this side of the discussion from where we started about the Heartland model. And remember how I asked you about the type of people who really like the Heartland model, who are kind of more converted to it than the mainstream, more Mesoamerican LDS model of where the Book of Mormon took place and stuff, and about the ways in which the type of Heartlanders and the ultra like conservative fundamentalist prepper side of Mormonism right now, how they interpret the leadership of the LDS Church. And what I kind of got a sense from is like, you know, you mentioned the prophets in the Book of Mormon who are badasses with their banner title of liberties and stuff, and that just not being what the membership, or that being not represented in these old men in the corporate LDS Church. And you have these beliefs and they're not being able to be tamped down, and the container is the LDS Church, but really the people themselves, they're looking for a way to express these beliefs that started with Joseph Smith, and finding their own lane within it. So I think for the LDS Church to put a wrangle on it is going to shut down some of their most ardent believers if they take a stance one way or another. It's like, it's not about saving people's lives. It's not about kids. It's not about the health. It's not about doing anything Christian. It's about what covers our bases the most and has the best PR, keeps the most Orthodox people in. Does that make sense? That's kind of
totally
where I think of it, where it's like they just don't have a vested interest in speaking up and saying anything.
Yeah. There definitely is a large subculture in the church of members that believe the Book of Mormon, think prophets need to be this Captain Moroni that's ripping his shirt apart and screaming title of liberty, give me liberty or give me death type of speeches. And they don't see that coming from, the 99-year-old prophet that's up there telling people to be nice to their neighbor, or President Monson that's telling grandfather stories every time he takes the pulpit. That disconnect that people that love and believe in the Book of Mormon is causing a rift and creating a space for these people to gather together. And they gather together at places like Avow, another Voice of Warning website that talks about destructions, doomsday stuff, visions from past prophets, visions and dreams of the destructions of the last days that have been compiled into books by Roger K. Young, which he was speaking at the event that I met Tim at. He's part of, or some of those people are part of Eternal Core. So there's this group, this subculture within Mormonism that creates this echo chamber for what prophets really should do. Destructions of the last days, doomsday prepper type of mentality. And that's a very big subculture right now. I mean, a really big subculture right now. What should the church do about it? I don't know. But ignoring that it's not there and not going to cause problems, and not going to cause harm, and not going to bring forth further Chad and Lori Daybell episodes, that's burying your head in the sand.
Yeah. So I'm so glad that we're talking about it. More people are talking about it. And to just also bring people up to speed on kind of some of the things that you talked about last time, that you were in many of these meetings with Elder Ballard and Tim Ballard, talking about how he should, move his career and work with the American Covenant Project, which is like a Heartland literal belief in the Book of Mormon. And my understanding from what you said last time is that this is such an important message that Elder Ballard really grabbed a hold to. And what do you think were Elder Ballard's motivations, either like what he literally said to you of what he wants to see from you, or what do you think his overall motivations were for the church and through Tim? and you guys?
Yeah, that's a good question. All of Elder Ballard's motivations, when I had one really long meeting with Elder Ballard and Tim and John Moreland, the president of OUR. That's the only really long meeting I had specifically with Elder Ballard. I was in meetings with other general authorities. And what came out of that meeting was a very specific assignment that I talked about in the last video to create a TV series for a wider non-Mormon audience. And that's what we were going to work on. Elder Ballard expressed interest or support for the American Covenant message. He loved it. He was a supporter of Tim's books, and he wanted to promote that message out there. And the way I took it at the time was, okay, this is a missionary tool to gather people towards the cause of restoring the covenant on the American land. And that's how I took it. The flip side and the other motivation that might have been behind that is the church has been pushing hard for a really long time, for a couple of decades, actually trying to assimilate into the wider evangelical Christian community, being considered a part of that Christian. And that's why their branding has completely radically changed. When I was on a mission, our missionary discussions were straight up, we are different from Christianity. All of the Christian creeds are an abomination. That's what Joseph Smith said. And we are not them. That's the message. When I was a missionary, that's the message we were preaching. I went to Poland, and that was in our discussions. The first discussion was a little bit about Jesus Christ. Then we skipped right on to the second discussion, Joseph Smith, and why all these other churches are an abomination and wrong and apostate. That the foundations of America were all divinely inspired. God led the Pilgrims, Puritans here. He inspired the founding fathers. He made sure that we won the Revolutionary War so that the Mormon Church could be established. That's what Elder Ballard was promoting. That's a storyline in Tim's book. And Tim would go, it's all so that there'd be a place of freedom where temples could be restored and all of mankind could be saved through temple work. Mm-hmm. And so that's the narrative, and it fits the church's PR program to say, we're Christian too, we're one of you. And they're using Tim and his research to further that cause. Mm-hmm. And that's what the TV show Elder Ballard tasked me and Tim to do was all about, is connect Mormonism with Christian identities and the Protestant foundations of American history. And boom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's amazing. Interesting context, and not too far of a stretch from most of what I was raised in my Provo, Utah ward and family is a lot of that American exceptionalism. But what I think is so interesting that you brought up is, yes, the church's recent move away from saying I'm a Mormon and trying to integrate more into these evangelical circles, and especially Tim Ballard now moving into these Catholic circles. So Tim Ballard spoke at the Catholic Voice for something.
For Trump.
It's a Catholic Prayer for Trump. That's what it was called. Catholic Prayer for Trump at Mar-a-Lago. And I know a little bit about his Catholic connections through Mel Gibson. He's good friends with Mel Gibson and Jim Caviezel, who played him in Sound of Freedom. And as I've watched a lot of Lynn Packer's things and coming up, it does kind of make sense that he's trying to kind of move into these more Catholic circles. And, like you brilliantly mentioned, the church never in a million years would have aligned itself with what apostles and prophets were calling the great abominable church was winked and nodded to be the Catholic Church for a long time. And I want to ask you another question real quick about M. Russell Ballard. But first, I just want to, for context, I want to bring in as much of the lawsuit as I can. And there is a portion of it where on I think it's page 47, number 233, Ballard also asked Celeste Boris to obtain a letter from his bishop of his congregation of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to show to the press and Catholic Speakers Organization that he was in good standing with the church. So I don't know if he was long-term, once he knew that this stuff was going to come out, that he needed to strategically start making a Catholic play from moving from the Mormon audience and trying to get a hold of the Catholic audience, because this happened September 17th, 2023, just a couple days right after his announcement in Vice News from the LDS Church, and to show the press and the Catholic Speakers Organization that he was in good standing with the LDS Church. And this letter is on behalf of his bishop in the Cedar Pass ward, and it says, after meeting with Tim Ballard, I find him in good standing in the LDS Church, and assigned his bishop, and then the bishop later revoked the letter. And it does go to show that Tim was trying to, play both sides, and now strategically moving over to something perhaps completely different. Because when he was speaking at that, he's wearing a mother, what's it called? I'm not Catholic enough to know. It's like a
saint,
a Mary necklace.
Yeah.
And talking to the leader, the host of it, saying like, you said you were thinking of considering a conversion to Catholic.
He's like, well, I'm considering it.
Yeah.
It's like, you guys love me enough.
Yeah. Yeah. So
it makes sense to me that that Catholicism might have a place for Tim, because according to Mormon doctrine, and this as a missionary, this is what I was teaching, is that the Catholic Church is the great and abominable church spoken of in the book of Revelations. And so forever, Catholic Church and Mormonism has been, they've been in opposition. They've been fighting against each other. Mostly Mormonism trying to denounce Catholicism. I don't think Catholicism cares about Mormons at all. 15 million members is like nothing to them. So the Catholic audience and everybody that's involved in Catholicism doesn't care about Mormonism, doesn't care about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints or any of its members. They're not in that sphere of discussions. And so this lawsuit, any allegations, any against Tim is not being circulated.
It's not on the radar.
It's not on the radar. And so rebranding, if I was going to rebrand and try and take us, a message to a new audience, that's a bigger audience. That is a sphere where they're not likely to come across any of the nefarious allegations that are plaguing them right now. And so that's a pretty smart move.
Mm-hmm. Instead of like communicating with visions and dead prophets and stuff with his like Mormon lane, he's going to do that with like saints or something.
He's going
Catholicism. I just thought of that. Watch out, Catholics. This is where I want to get serious and be like, Catholics, is it working? I made a whole video about the church's just general rebranding that you did a good job explaining. Missionaries are allowed to use their first names now, and in some pilot programs wear normal clothes, invite people to like worship services and Bible studies and stuff. Mm-hmm. And that's where I come in and I'm like, did the proposition of the Mormon church just completely fail? And we're not acknowledging that, that it was supposed to be restored in opposition to these things that you guys are now aligning with. Are we just ignoring that the entire proposition of Mormonism failed? Hey guys, if you're out there and you're paying attention, is it working? Like, are more people converting to this? Is this rebrand going to work? So it's the same kind of thing with Tim. Like, Catholics, watch out. Is it working? Is he convincing? Or do you guys just not paying attention and putting these together? So it's podcasts like this that are important for other people who could be susceptible to con men, to people taking advantage of their money, spiritually manipulating them, just with a different vehicle, different religious system. So let's not ignore that. So I always like to say, pay attention. Don't just think it's, this one religion, they believe some kooky things. A lot of different people might be susceptible to all this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. And it's probably also an effort to try and stem the bleeding with membership leaving the church. There's a lot of offshoots that I've investigated and been a part of within Mormon subcultures that are like, the church is not being led by Christ. The doctrines and everything doesn't match up to New Testament Christianity. And so they create this subculture of sort of fundamentalist. And that's what Tim really was a part of. That's what the American Covenant message, catered to. So to wholesale flip and go to Catholicism, I don't know. It'd be interesting to see how he justifies that. If the whole American Covenant and the purpose of it was to build Mormon temples, now how is that going to support Catholicism, bring them into the mix if they're not supposed to be Mormons themselves?
Yeah,
it'll be interesting to see how he spins that.
Yeah, that's going to be something that Tim's going to have to answer for eventually if he converts to Catholicism or whatever he does. When did you feel like your shelf broke again? When did you leave the church again?
Well, I don't think there's a specific point anybody leaves the church like this is it, because I have my entire life full of experiences, some good, some bad. And so it's a transition of changing my belief structure to something that works for me and my family. And that transition, I anticipate will go on the rest of my life. There's things that are in the church that were good influences on me, things that I hold on to, and there's things that I have to let go because they're harmful. And so it's a transition that there was a shelf breaking incident when I was looking hard and heavy into polygamy for a number of years. I was consuming every single book on for against it, stuff from RLDS positions, apologists from Mormons, and trying to figure out what happened, where this lies. And my wife was looking into it heavy, and we were trying to sort out what actually is true about the story and saga of polygamy. And this went on for a number of years, probably for about 3 years. And it was the hyperactive, obsessive part of my brain that latched onto this and was trying so hard to figure it out and consuming so much material. And then I was on Facebook and I saw a meme put up by LeGrand Pastra, the silver plates. And it had this picture of in reference to the claim that Joseph Smith was visited by an angel with a flaming sword saying, you need to live this law or I'm going to strike you down. Right. That's in the history. And then this guy made this meme where it was President Nelson on his knees and Brigham Young as an angel appeared to him with an AR-15 saying, you need to reinstate polygamy or I'm going to shoot you on the spot. And that snapped my brain. I was laughing so hard. It's like all of this information in my head, trying to sort this out. All of a sudden it is like, this is absolutely ridiculous. And I was laughing and crying and I couldn't stop. And my kids actually were home and they called my wife and like, something happened to Dad. He's kind of laughing. He's kind of crying and he's pretty hysterical. I think you need to come home. So that was a moment, kind of a turning point with at least the saga of polygamy for me.
Yeah. So what I hear you saying is throughout the years and even up till right now, even up till our last interview together, like you are still, for lack of a better word, like deconstructing your beliefs, integrating, what you're taking from your time with Tim, your time with Elder Ballard, your time with the church, and still kind of figuring things out. And I think that's honestly up to the moment as you're processing and you're talking, and it's kind of like putting different pieces together. Am I wrong? Like that's kind of what I feel like is going on here and untangling these different threads. So, and I think as time goes on, we will learn more. Hopefully more people will reach out. If they want to come sit down. Anyone else who's connected to this, I'm going to keep talking to Ryan about as many of these things as we can get into before I leave for camp, leaving to work at a summer camp. But Ryan, do you think that we'll have more time in the next month to sit down and have another interview? Maybe.
Probably.
All right. There's so many other things to get into. I'm really interested to hear people's reaction. If you have any more information, more tips, if anybody out there wants to reach out to me, my email is thenuanceho@gmail.com. It's linked down below in the description. So thank you again, Ryan, for reaching out, and hopefully we'll continue these conversations because we are putting the pieces together to this.
Yeah,
and
we're going to get to the bottom of this.
Yeah.
Keep digging until we figure out what actually is going down.
Yeah. All right. Any final words? Anything else you want to leave the people with? They love you. They appreciate you. I can hear their claps and applauses right now.
Yeah. No, I don't want to be talking about this. This is really sad and disturbing, but it's an important conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I do feel that.
Yeah. I appreciate your time so much. It's an important conversation to have. I think you're doing this for all the right reasons, and especially just trying to make, like I said, as much noise so that the women who have been alleged victims in this entire situation of Tim Ballard, all the way to the point of literal penetration. Great. So many people who can't even come forward. As much as we talk about this, I think it helps other victims in similar circumstances rise up and feel like they're, not suffocated down and can be heard. So it's a super important project to me, and just can't thank you enough, Ryan, for having another episode with me. So I will let you go now.
Okay.
Thank you, man.
All right. Thanks.
Ryan has been a dream to work with. I have to say, I am so proud of Ryan stepping up and saying what he knows, because it is really hard for just about anyone to speak out against Tim Ballard. So everyone, sit tight. We have a lot more with Ryan coming in the next weeks and months to come. Do subscribe, hit the bell for notifications so you can know when new videos drop, and share this wherever you can. And if you have the financial means, please reach out. I am a 501c3 nonprofit now. So I want to be able to build something long-term in this community, kicking around to see what else we can expose with this. So this is honestly just the beginning. So if you've donated to this channel, that's what keeps me going. Thank you so much for supporting me and believing me. I'm wrapping up this season. I've done about 50 episodes now since I started my nonprofit and this section of my podcast, not my YouTube channel, but just since September, I was able to accomplish making over, I think, around 50 podcast episodes right now. It feels incredible to have this kind of support, and some donors have really helped out, and I would love to find more people moving in and out of this space who are also willing to contribute. We are hopefully going to Greece. I need a few more people to actually make the trip happen. So if you've been considering it, not only is it going to be a fun trip to Greece, Athens and Santorini for 7 days, there's a link down below. 7 days, Athens and Santorini, making a bunch of new friends, having a great time, me and my hilarious husband. So if you need a break from all of this, cruise around on a yacht, I got you. And also all of the extra, the money in the margins for the trip, that goes to my nonprofit, helps sustain this podcast. So it's be a great way to fund the podcast, fund the nonprofit, and also get a trip to Greece. So time's a ticking. I only have till maybe like the 28th of May. I know that I'm a little bit of a caffeinated spaz sometimes, but this is what I really want to do for as long as I can do it. Interview people and just expose the problems that need to be addressed within Mormonism to make it a healthier place to belong to. Do it with humor, do it with safety, vulnerability. And it's just meant so much that all of my guests who have come in here have all said, Carrie, you've made such a safe space, and I feel comfortable telling you all of these things that I normally would not say on camera. That's my biggest reward. That's my takeaway of running this podcast and doing these 50 episodes in September. So it means so much to have people trust me, to have the women from this Tim Ballard lawsuit tell me that I'm really onto something and that I'm doing a good job. And the more stir and the more noise that I can make, the better, because they are up against a gigantic avalanche, immense amount of struggles. Want to give a voice to them, victims everywhere. So thank you so much for tuning into this very, very important episode of the Mormon History Hoedown. Like I always say, don't let somebody else ruin your life for you. You ruin it for yourself. Take it back. Love you so much.